welcome to the Learning Technology Advisory Committee, March 6, 2015. We are very happy that we have a quorum here in spite of bad weather in some parts of the states, particularly the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where we were blessed with the largest snowfall ever on that date on Thursday morning. So a lot of institutions thought we were going to open late, and instead we had to close for the day. So Patrick got here too, so welcome. We've got a few new committee members, so I'd like to go around and have everybody introduce themselves and just where you are from and what your position is. So we can start over here on this end.
Jason Woodall, Lamar Institute of Technology. I'm the Director of Distance Learning.
Charlene Stubblefield from Prairie View A&M University. I'm a Senior Instructional Designer.
Patrick Plush, University of North Texas, Associate Vice Provost of Learning Enhancement.
Jacqueline Mock. I'm the Vice President for Academic, Faculty, and Student Affairs at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio.
Patsy LeMaster. I'm the Associate VP of Teaching and Learning at Amarillo College.
I'm Todd Leach. I'm the Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston.
Michelle Betancourt. I'm the Director of Distance Education at Wharton County Junior College.
Pam Quinn, Provost at the LaCroix Center for the Dallas County Community College District, in charge of learning technologies and distance learning.
Andrew Lofters, Program Director for Academic Quality and Workforce for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board.
Kimberly Gibson. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Academic Affairs for Online Learning at Our Lady of the Lake University.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Dodon. I'm Director of Distance Learning and Instructional Technology for Texas A&M University, Kingsville.
Hello, I'm Christina Cross. I'm Director for Online Technologies with Lone Star College System.
Good morning. I'm Pat Abrego, Director of Instructional Technology and Distance at Texas A&M International in Laredo.
Okay, and we have our guests, our members on the phone with us. Hello?
I'm Pam Morgan, Director for the Center of Continuing Professional and Distance Education at Midwestern State University.
And I'm Bill Angrove, Associate Vice President for Distance Education at Sam Houston State University.
Well, welcome. First on the agenda then is a consideration and the approval of the minutes. You have the copy of the minutes from October 13th. I'll give you just a minute or two to look them over, and then I ask for a motion to approve.
I have one correction. It has me marked as absent on the membership attendees, Michelle Betancourt. I was here.
Okay, we'll get that changed.
Yes, got it changed, fixed.
Any other corrections? Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes from October 13th and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes approved. Okay, now we can get into the meat of our meeting today. And with this, I would like to pass it over to Pam Morgan. And this is a discussion on the Texas A&M University Corpus Christi proposed distance education Doctor of Nursing Practice program. Pam and Patsy have reviewed this as part of the committee work that we have done, and they will give us a report to the full committee. Pam?
Yes, thank you, Pam. The subcommittee reviewed this proposal, and there's just a few highlights that we wanted to bring before the committee. Some things we usually look at. There's going to be a template used for the courses, and this is going to ensure uniformity for the students in Blackboard. The primary delivery is going to be Blackboard, but there will be some clinical and practical experiences supported in the students' communities. When a test is given, it will be proctored. We did find that it looked like there would be sufficient training for the faculty teaching in Blackboard, which I know is something we're always looking at. The classroom size looks healthy with approximately 25 in each class. There's 2 areas of concentration, the family nurse practitioner and the executive leadership. Currently, A&M is one of the largest nursing practitioner programs in the state, and they do have a 90% certification passing rate. They'd like to begin this program in the fall. So the subcommittee would like to recommend this to Ltac for consideration.
Good. Pardon?
As well as we have Dr. Eve Lehman here from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, who's going to be over the program if you have any other further questions. And I did want to mention that the Doctor of Nursing Practice did have a site visit that was conducted by staff fairly recently. And from the consultants' report, they did have a very favorable, highly favorable opinion of their distance ed online component for the program, which we are considering today. And I did want to stress, this is our recommendation of approval for the, as we usually do, for the online portion of the program, the doctoral distance ed online component of the program. This is not the final approval. It still needs to go in front of the cause committee and the full board, if it goes that direction.
So we've heard the highlights of the program from Pam Morgan. So now we would like to turn it over to you to give us some highlights that you want us to know about and just a little bit more about the background of the program.
Thank you. First, I'd like to tell you how we are so glad to be here, me representing the College of Nursing and Health Sciences. We have wanted to provide this educational opportunity to our professional workforce in South Texas. It has some unique characteristics in that it is difficult to get out of Brownsville up to Corpus Christi, heading into San Antonio to attend the traditional face-to-face brick and mortar classrooms, and even the executive format is sometimes difficult for people to get to. So we've, as a profession, have adopted this as a value. It's a clinical professional doctorate. It is designed to expand the skill set of registered nurses who have advanced education to handle the more complex patient problems that standard protocols and basic preparation sometimes isn't sufficient, and then to create the innovative systems. So we are hoping and expect to impact the healthcare of South Texans through our approach. So this is our next step, is to get the approvals. Through our site visit, we have modified our start date. It will not be fall 2015. We began our proposal and our planning in 2010, which was then the idea, but with all the changes in review processes, we are now here at this. So the recommendation was, and we were very appreciative of that we start in fall 2016. That may make it help explain how we're going to handle the final year of getting ready. What else did I want? I wanted you to know that this would be a postmaster's DNP program across the United States. There are post-baccalaureate. We will be taking people who already have a master's degree in family nurse practitioner And that's the other recommendation, was that we start with one specialty and then add the second specialty after we have tested our processes and graduated the first group through our sequence. So all of our first students that will be admitted will have earned Masters of Science in Nursing as family nurse practitioners. To practice as a family nurse practitioner, they will have had to have completed a minimum of 500 clinical hours, so they will bring to our program the 500 clinical hours. What else would I? Our faculty, we are in the process of building faculty. We have recently hired 2 new faculty, not just to support the DNP program, but they come to us with clinical expertise, which in a practice doctorate is the valued knowledge base. One of them was the Chief Nursing Officer for the Menninger Clinic in Houston, which is a premier psychiatric mental health center, and the new graduate department chair came from Central Florida, where she was the DNP program coordinator there. So we have multiple nurses who are board certified. They're teaching our FNP program. They've had their own practice. One of them is a member of the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. She's a fellow. We think we're ready and excited about this opportunity and look forward to any feedback that you may give us.
I have a question. Just in the program, it's a Doctor of Nursing Practice. Are the people that achieve this degree called doctors?
Yes. And a very similar as you would a PharmD who earns his, the Doctor of Physical Therapy, the degree. Now, whether or not the nurse in the practice arena chooses to introduce him or herself as doctor is their decision. Most of my colleagues who are nurse practitioners who have earned DNPs choose not to because they feel their relationship doesn't require that. But as a professional at the table, they are doctors.
Did you have a question, Pam? Comment?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think she understood you.
Okay, I have another question for you. Is this a cohort program?
Yes.
Will students be going through? And
Yes.
how many students do you expect to serve?
Our original plan was to admit 25, but following our site review, they've recommended realistically to start with 12. So our plan is for the first 2 cohorts to admit 12 students, moving up to the 25 by year 5.
And you said it was difficult to kind of get out of South Texas, but this can reach beyond South Texas, right?
It can, but our target population has been, yes, it can go outside of South Texas, but our commitment is to introducing this level of practice to our region, going into Laredo. We have a strong partnership with A&M International University. We delivered their graduate program for the first several years. I was sharing that I used to drive back and forth to TTVN. We've been in the distance ed for a long time. We will not limit admissions to residents of South Texas communities, but that's where we're marketing, and that's the mission that we have.
You saw the need. And is the program designed to be completed in 3 years?
2 years.
2 years? Okay.
We anticipate that particularly when we start the executive leadership track, there may be a longer time in the clinical hours that they have to meet because across, there's not a national standard for administrative nursing programs in the clinical hours they have, but there is a standard for nurse practitioners. You cannot sit for national certification exams. So what we anticipated would be the delay moving towards graduation would be those extra clinical hours. Our outcome, major outcome, besides the clinical hours, is a capstone project. The way the program is designed, they will start working on that the minute they step into the classroom, first class, and we know that not everybody finishes that within the prescribed time period. But when you look at a national level, the number of people enrolled in graduating in DMP programs has grown 8,000% over the year since it was introduced. And we've examined the formats that we adopted. The 40 credit hours allows time to complete those activities that would contribute to that scholarly project. So we anticipate 2 years.
Other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at your written proposal, and if you wouldn't mind, just if you've got yours in front of you, you talk about in Section 5 on expected enrollment, and this would be the paragraphs that start with line 593, and you talk about, actually a little bit further up, 578, about the distance learning, and you had already talked about the cohort group. And then if you move further in your proposal, on the lines 1010, 1010, and you talk about interactive class assignments for the students. Could you walk me through your intentions as you see it right now about how to foster that cohort model? That's always a real challenge for distance programs that are cohort where they don't actually meet in a face-to-face. And what has been informing your thinking as you design the program? Thank you.
Well, what has partly been, or major informing us, is the delivery of our Masters of Science in Nursing program since 2004 through only online Blackboard technology. And we have, as an N of 1 being our program, but also attending national conferences, we have discovered that through group projects in the course, through synchronous activities within the Blackboard shell, which can include the chat. I have used the chat very frequently when I teach a complex class such as research, or I teach organizational behavior, the theoretical models, and sometimes that discussion gets a little difficult, so we use synchronous chats. We have adopted WebEx most recently, which works very well with Blackboard. We have so students learn and get engaged with the faculty member and with their classmates. They also will be introduced at an orientation with their other classmates in that may be in the communities where they are, and they have experientially, from my perspective, they create their subgroups. We also have faculty who live across the state of Texas. We have one of our FNP program coordinator lives in Nacogdoches. One of our faculty who's had her private practice lives in New Boston, and our current clinical coordinator for the nurse practitioner program, the clinical aspect, lives in San Antonio. So students, they have actual interactions within those communities with those students. So I guess that's my response.
Other questions? Comments? Todd?
I'll just make one comment. I thought the submission was very thorough. I thought the evidence of your use of distance education and other programs was very clear, and I thought the case for why the program was needed, particularly for South Texas, was very compelling. So, as another fellow institution offering a DNP program, I thought it was very good. So, just wanted to comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you. And UTMB, the nursing program there, are some of our best friends. We there's a competitive angle to everything, but you represent institutions that we have worked with across our graduate and undergraduate programs, and we meet, the DMP directors meet at a state level quarterly and share information. It's a wonderful group of people to work with.
Nice comment. Thank you on both sides. Approval to approve? Any other questions? We have a motion.
I move that we approve the program proposed by A&M Corpus Christi.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and second the Doctor of Nursing Practice Program from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all in favor, and motion has passed. Congratulations. Sounds like you have a good program in front of you.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And I'll let you get on to the rest of your business. Thanks.
Good. Okay, we have now gone through the third and fourth agenda item. We're actually going to look at the fifth agenda item, which is the update on the instructional survey of learning technology with Patrick from UNT, and we're going to move that to the first agenda item following lunch. We may move some of the other agendas up prior to lunch. So the next one will be an update on the distance education database inventory, and I will pass that to Dr. Andrew Lofters, who can update us on his work in this area.
Well, there's not a whole lot to update for this cycle. We have a position that's open right now that deals directly with taking the distance ed database and putting it onto the portal. And as we recall from the last meetings, our goal is to have this a real-time database where institutions can report their distance ed courses by whatever modality they are being delivered, off-campus, face-to-face, electronic to group, or fully online or hybrid, as well as whatever location these courses are being delivered. And as they're updating it, institutions would be able to see it on a public database as well. Sort of pretty similar to our current program inventory that institutions can see if they go to the coordinating board website. Once this position is filled, which is called I think it's BMR, I believe, is the name of the position. Once this position is filled, the first one, according to what I was told yesterday, that's the first task they will have, is to put this this database onto an online portal. So it's still coming. We haven't forgot about it, and just let you know that we're still working on that database.
Will you have any way of knowing whether it is being updated, or will you be watching when updates are taking place?
What we were going to do is remind institutions one time a year. This is just to give them notice. It's time for you to update your distance education inventory on the coordinating board website and inside the portal. And then anytime they have an addition or a change inside their distance ed inventory, they can do that in real time. So we'll just be looking, yes, and monitoring, but we can see what they're doing.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you for that update, Dr. Lofters. The next is the update on state authorization reciprocity agreement process. Do we have our representative here?
Yes.
Good. We'll call him to the
We
table.
have John Wyatt with us from our External Relations Department here at our division here at the Coordinating Board. And as well, inside your packet, you also have an update that I put in there from Sarah. This is the most recent one that I received. I decided just to put it in there for your own information.
And before we ask John Wyatt to speak to us about this, I thought I'd give you an update on what is happening in the South. I've been in touch with Mary Lawson Larson, who is head of SREB and is working with the electronic campus and is the one that is working with the process of getting the states in SREB accepted. And the latest I got from her is that Arkansas has already submitted an application, and they will probably be approved in May. So Arkansas is moving forward. Alabama is very much still in the discussion process ongoing, and they're trying to determine who would be the portal for Alabama. Delaware has determined that the Department of Education there will be the portal, but they are still in the process of seeking approval. Florida is more like Alabama. They're just discussing who would be the portal there. Georgia has decided that it's expected that the Georgia Non-Public Post-Secondary Education Commission will be the portal for Georgia. Kentucky is in the same place as Georgia, but they have determined that is the Kentucky Post-Secondary Education Commission will be their portal. Louisiana has moved ahead. They are approved, and the portal there is the Louisiana Board of Regents. Maryland needs legislation as similar to what Texas needs, but they have determined that the Maryland Higher Ed Commission would be the portal there. Mississippi is like Florida and Alabama. They're in discussion, and they don't know who would be the portal agency. North Carolina has determined that University of North Carolina would be the portal for all the institutions in the state, but they are still figuring out how that will work. Oklahoma is also expected to have their application in May, so they are moving forward, as is Arkansas. And in Oklahoma, it will be the Board of Regents that's the portal. South Carolina has in discussion, but they have determined that it is the South Carolina Commission on Higher Ed that will be the portal. Tennessee has introduced legislation, and the Tennessee Higher Ed Commission is the portal there. Texas, we'll hear an update on that in a moment. Virginia has been approved. They are in. The State Council for Higher Ed is the portal in Virginia. And West Virginia has also been approved, and it's the West Virginia Higher Education Policy Commission that is the portal. The area that has the most members so far is WICHE, which is the Western Interstate Cooperative for Higher Education. And most of the states in the West have already joined, and that's probably because Sarah, where Marshall Hill is located, is right there in the WICHE offices, so they have a very high awareness of what is happening with that. So WICHE is moving along, leading that area. But our last commission, I sit on the national board for that. The last meeting, they were extremely pleased with the number of states that were coming, and Marshall has said this was far easier than he thought it was going to be. Most of the states understand the importance of doing this on behalf of students and helping their own students as well as students in other states that might want to come into their state. So they're very, very pleased with the progress. Our next board meeting is in Boston in May, so there will be an update with that. But overall, I think it is moving forward at a pace that is exceeding expectations when this started. So now we need to get an update on what is happening in the state of Texas. So thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you. Again, my name is John Wyatt. I'm Director of External Relations here at the Coordinating Board. And in External Relations, we're responsible for communicating with the legislature on the board's legislative recommendations. And as you know, the board did adopt as one of their recommendations for this session that the agency be named the portal for SARA. So what we have been doing in external relations has been educating members regarding the benefits of SARA. So we have met with the members of the House Higher Education Committee, the Senate Higher Education Committee, the House Appropriations and Senate Finance Committee to make sure that they understand this recommendation. A few things to note. You may be aware when the Senate Higher Education Committee submitted their interim report a couple months ago. Included in that was a letter from Senator Brian Birdwell in which he expressed what he said some cautions regarding Texas participation in SARA. And those cautions were that Texas should not participate if it would remove decision-making authority from the citizens of Texas, boards of regents, or other government or higher education officials. and that the National Council should be carefully vetted to ensure that it is not used as a vehicle by the federal government to facilitate further federal intrusion into state operations of universities. Our staff did meet with Senator Birdwell and his staff to help address some of these concerns and stressed particularly the voluntary nature of participation in SARA, that there's certainly nothing to compel any institution to participate in SARA, and that it does not represent any abrogation of authority on Texas' behalf in terms of our ability to set our own standards. So we hopefully that the senator appreciated that information. So hopefully that helped mollify his concerns. In terms of where we stand right now, we've been working with legislative offices to have legislation introduced. We understand that Representative John Rainey will be introducing legislation on the House side. We actually there's a deadline of Friday of next week for legislation to be introduced and be considered this session. We've been working with some members on the Senate side as well to get legislation introduced in that body. So we're expecting that next week we will see legislation that would actually enact Texas participation in SARA introduced into the legislature. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. I know that there have been a number of people on this commission that have really endorsed the work of the legislature in terms of pushing forward this. Are there any comments, Patrick or Pam? I know we've kind of heard from some of you about the urgency to make sure that this does get passed during this session. Any other comments that we can pass along?
I'd received an email inquiring about how much our institution had spent on state authorization. I suppose other people got that same survey. I wondered what the results look like and if there was a cost statewide that was kind of estimated for participation for what we are bearing now without participation in the reciprocity agreement.
Anybody comment on that?
Oh, I'll just note in some of the educational materials that we've been providing to members, we have an estimate that Texas public institutions that offer the highest number of online education offerings across state lines estimate about $150,000 to $200,000 in annual expenditures for operating in other states. So that's a data point that we've been sharing with the legislature. And I'll also note going forward, certainly once legislation is introduced, it's certainly going to be helpful for institutions to let legislators know directly how important this is. And I do know that many of your system GR are out there meeting with legislators to make clear that this is a priority for your systems, and that's very helpful.
How would you recommend we make those that endorsement? Letters or contacts?
I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. It's certainly good to, letters are good, personal contacts to members. And, particularly once we have bills actually introduced, it'll be very helpful to be able to focus on, this is the legislation, HB, whatever the number, that we really need to see move through the process.
What is the best way for us to keep up with that?
Maybe the easiest way to do it is for me to communicate with Andrew in terms of once the bills have been introduced, I will make sure that he knows which bills those are, and he can provide that information to you. What will happen is the bills will be scheduled for a hearing at some point before the Senate Higher Education or the House Higher Education Committee. So that would be kind of the first time that it's really considered by either chamber. And that's public information. That'll be posted probably about a week before that actually happens. At that point, they'll take testimony. So that's always a good time to make sure you're in contact with, your local legislator, as well as the members of the committee.
In addition to our institution's own stories dealing with state authorization, do you have a list of, say, the talking points that you're sharing with legislatures that we might want to also incorporate into some of these personal contacts?
Well, what I can provide you is we actually have it's an overview document. Okay. Why don't I'll provide that to Andrew as well, and he can distribute to the committee.
And I know SREB is very interested in the process that we are going through, too, so that they're trying to keep up with it as well. So, and I do know, having sat on the NC-SARA National Commission, that Senator Birdwell's concerns and cautions are one that the Commission has really tried to deal with. And the Department of Ed has been very involved watching this, but they are not really on the Commission. Yes. They want to know what's going on, but they have not they've not really influenced anything. And Marshall Hill, who actually used to be here at the coordinating board, is making sure that there's distance. And in some cases, I know he has come out, in opposition to things that they have been proposing. But that's why the whole process is a voluntary process, and we're just trying to alleviate some of the bureaucratic complexities of institutions trying to do business in other states, and other states trying to work with our students in Texas that might need a program that we don't have. And so it's really been driven by what is good for students, and we're trying to overcome some of the just maybe the unnecessary bureaucracy. I know there are some key CEOs in the state that are saying this is really ludicrous. We don't even need this. We shouldn't even have it. But once the camel got his nose under the tent in terms of the Department of Ed saying that institutions must be authorized to participate and serve students in other states, then we're all liable if we're not in compliance. But in order to keep up with that, and even for institutions that don't have a lot of external students, it's just a safe way to make sure that we're in compliance and that the students in the other states and our own students are protected as citizens. So it's a complex thing, but I think it's pretty neat that the online community is coming together to try to solve this problem in a voluntary way, in a sensible way, taking the pressure off of us to do the work and the cost of doing this individually. So I think most of the members on this commission support the work that you're doing with the legislature. And so if there's anything else we can do, we would like to support you in that area, because we would like to see this passed.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate, that the more voices there are that members are hearing from, that this is a priority for institutions, that this is something that's very important, the more that message is going to resonate.
Good. So I would just recommend all the commission members that once we hear from Dr. Lofters on what we need to do, who we need to contact, that we actually make those contacts either ourselves or through those that are institutions that work with the legislators. And that's another thing, too. Even though we're well aware of this issue, most of us have people that are, down here in Austin, particularly this time of the year, that they know that this is an important issue and are informed about it. There's so much those people have to keep up with and what's going on. But if there are specific things within institutions that we want to make sure that our representatives know about, that'll be up to us to make sure that happens. So, good work.
Pam, I had a question. Do you know how likely it is that this will be tied to a bill that has other provisions, or will it solely concentrate on state authorization?
It's really impossible to say. Our expectation is that it will be introduced as a standalone bill. But, they say, legislation and sausage making are two things you should never, watch too closely. So, there's always the potential that it could be added to a larger vehicle. It's just difficult to say at this point.
Were there any other concerns expressed in addition to what Senator Birdwell had asked? Stated? Those
concerns were the only ones that we've heard. It seems like some of the initial concern does stem from a concern of are we ceding authority? Are we essentially allowing potential rogue actors to come into the state? And we've been trying to message that and make clear that this is not a process that would lead to that result. I honestly think for most members, it's just a matter of they don't know about it. This is not something that they've really given any thought to. So the job we have is really just education. Making sure that they understand what SARA is and what the benefits are. And when we've laid that out for members, they've been very receptive.
Do we have very many requests coming in from institutions in other states to get approval to operate in Texas? And who handles that here?
We do get inquiries about institutions wanting to offer coursework here in Texas. The person that monitors that activity is Cam Merritt inside the Academic Quality and Workforce Division. A lot of times, since I usually handle the distance ed approval processes and they see my name on the website, sometimes, and I specifically deal with in-state public institutions in Texas. But since they see my name sometimes on the distance ed part on our website, they come to me first and try to use some of our forms for that. But I then direct them to Cam. But she's the one that deals with them. I can't tell you the exact numbers, but I know that they do. They do inquire how to get that done.
Well, most of the institutions that are doing a lot of work nationally, which would probably be the for-profit online institutions, the proprietary ones, they've already invested in getting approval across the country. What they would just like to see is to keep that ongoing investment reduced so that the state reciprocity. But, trying to keep institutions out of Texas, they're probably going to be able to, find a way to do that anyway. But this actually should be more of a safeguard because we're really trying to make sure that whoever is approved has already gone through all the processes in their own state and in their own accrediting body. So this is just like I said, this is working on multiple levels, from the accreditation agencies, the federal levels watching it, the state levels watching it, and the institution, and then the regions. So it is complex, but the good news is the good intentions seem to be overriding the big objections. So it's just, we're watching it closely. So.
Well, I think it's an important point that, the situation we're in now, many of those actors could be in the state and we just have no idea. So, this provides a level of sunshine on, what's actually happening in terms of what's being offered in Texas. So, we see it as an obvious improvement over the status quo.
And the main thing is it gives the students, if they are having a problem with an institution, a process and a way to deal with that, and then it gets to state to state level. So if someone externally complained about an institution in the state of Texas, you would be alerted to it. The coordinating board would start being aware that there's a problem with how we are doing business. So it's kind of a check internally as well. So I think most of us see this as good coming up from multiple directions. So any other comments? Good comments? Appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much for your work and for meeting with us this morning.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we'll go to agenda item 9, which is the update on the distance education doctoral program approval form revisions that Dr. Lofters has been working with us. So we'll pass it to Andrew and let him tell us all the work that he's been doing.
Okay, inside your packet, there's 3 small packets of information. The first one says new doctoral degree proposal. One right behind it says distance education doctoral degree proposal. And there's one that has a highlight in yellow that has new distance education doctoral degree proposal. When we had the last meeting, we were discussing the process by which we approve doctoral programs, distance education doctoral programs in the state. And our current process is that an institution would fill out, if it's a new proposal, and when I say that, this is a new doctoral program that is not currently on their institutional inventory. It's brand new. What the institution would have to do is fill out a new doctoral proposal, new doctoral program proposal. At the same time, they would also fill out a new distance ed doctoral program proposal. And then they submit them both in the perfect world at the same time. So now they're filling out both of these forms. One goes to the program director who's taking care of the entire doctoral proposal approval process with a site visit and staff review and all that whole process. The other one would go towards us, the Ltac, or really it goes to the Ltac facilitator, me at first, and I look through it to see if it has everything in it, which I do. Go through all the different parts of the distance ed process, and I'll ask questions then. Then, if I think it's ready to go in front of the subcommittee, I then submit the form to the subcommittee, who then reviews it again. And if they have any questions, they can bring them up then, If they feel that it's all in order, they can then suggest that it is brought before the entire LTAC for consideration of approval. So there's a lot of paperwork in there. And so far that process is working well. And I think we said that in the last meeting. I gave you a report. So far we only had the last proposals that we had in the last meeting, and there's one that we had just now. And the process has worked smoothly because it allows us to have safeguards to make sure that everything is there before it reaches this body. So there's not as many aspects of the program that need a lot of questioning. We've already pretty much worked it out ahead of time. What we have here is, I took the new doctoral proposal form and I looked at the distance ed doctoral proposal form, and I said, well, let's just try to make it so it's just one form. If you have an institution that wants to have a new doctoral program that's not on their inventory, that's going to be delivered through some type of distance education means, they would have just one form. And if you look at the one that's highlighted in yellow on the front, the new distance ed doctoral proposal, if you go through, you'll notice that certain things I have highlighted in yellow in the text. So what I did is I took the regular doctoral proposal form, and the yellow parts are where the distance ed then addresses certain aspects of that. So I wanted to bring this to you first before I went any further to see what you thought about it, because you're at the institutions that would most likely have someone who would be proposing a doctoral proposal, to see what you thought. If you go through to the first page, or second page I should say, the first thing it starts to talk about is existing relationships to other doctoral programs. I put that in there from the distance ed part, and it talks about also the impact on existing face-to-face programs. That was not inside the regular proposal, the regular doctoral proposal, but I inserted that in that area. The next page, inside the regular doctoral proposal form, it asks where are you using technologies in the delivery of the program. But it wasn't specific as would be needed for a distance ed proposal. So what I did is I took the language from the distance ed proposal and placed it in there. The same with the yellow for the program evaluation. There were certain aspects that were specific to distance ed doctoral proposals that I actually inserted inside that portion as well. Same goes on through the rest of the proposal for library resources, the cost of funding the program. And then as you go towards the end, you notice that it's a lot of yellow, because these were the parts that were specific to just the distance ed proposal, that seemed to me that needed their own specific section, isolated section inside the proposal. So I wanted to bring this to you and let you look it over, and if you would give me any feedback and tell me if this is where you think we should go with this type of application process. Am I going in the wrong direction? But I'd like to hear from you on this.
You want us to take a look at this right now?
Yes, if you don't mind.
I would take a few minutes, look this over, and write your questions, and then we can discuss it.
Andrew, so I want to make sure I understand it correctly. This one would replace the other two, so it's basically a consolidation of a new doctoral program and a new distance delivered doctoral program in one.
Correct.
And it would come in and be routed to two different places.
Correct.
And
One
each of
form
them,
and
they're pieces of it.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So basically, you're taking. It's a little bit longer. The way when I see it, it might be a little bit longer, but it's just one form.
I think that's a step
Therefore,
forward.
it will go to both the program director that would be responsible for the approval process of just the regular doctoral program, and towards our area for Ltac to look at the distance ed at the same time, with just one form.
Very good, thanks.
I have a question. The title being New Distance Education Doctoral, how does that title represent that it's going to go to the two places? It doesn't to me. It makes you think that there's one for just regular doctoral process, and then this is the one for the distance only doctoral process.
That's a good question. Because right now, all right, the one that says the new distance ed, that's a combination of the two. The distance ed doctoral program, what I would do is I would change this title. I didn't revise this yet, but I would change this title to say existing. So if you had an existing program, this is a little bit smaller application process because we're looking directly at the distance ed delivery part. Or do we have every component necessary in order to deliver the program? So this one would be just for an existing program. And that's what it would read in the title. That's why I have new on this one. And I've actually, if you look on that first page underneath the directions, I could have highlighted that myself. And it says the institution shall use this form to propose a new distance ed doctoral program that is not, it should say is not, contained on its approved program inventory. So that tells them right then, if you don't have it, then you use this form. But if you already have it, this form would be the one that you would.
So if I could just restate that to make sure I understood your response. The one that's currently labeled distance education doctoral degree program, this would be the form if you are an institution that has an existing doctoral program and now you want to introduce a distance delivery format.
Correct. Correct.
As opposed to something that is totally new, that is also, whether it's distance only or whether it's distance and any other combination for a brand new program.
Right.
Or is this new distance education doctoral degree proposal exclusively distance doctoral, being brand new, but it's not the double, if you will. They're doing two cohort tracks.
So let me see if I'm understanding correctly. You're saying if it's a new program and it's being offered through distance and face-to-face, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If you were so ambitious that I don't know that we would be, or another institution would be, but I'm just trying to make sure I got it in my head.
If the program is going to be offered and it's brand new and it's going to have any type of distance ed delivery modality, they would have to use the new distance ed one because it has, even though you already it has a distance component, and you were saying that you're going to deliver it on the onset through that modality, you would have to use this form. If it didn't have anything, just face-to-face, it would just be the new doctoral form. Correct.
Thank you.
And then my other question is, on this gray area in the box, the information contact, why did that change between the two? Or is this the one with the highlight, is that the new name, Division of Quality, Academic Quality and Workforce?
That's us, yes, Academic Quality and Workforce.
So that's going to change on all of the documents?
Yes. The other two, I didn't do any revisions.
Okay.
What I did, I just drew from those two to make the new one. This is the more revised form, yes.
And there is still a separate process if it is brand new, that it has to get approved at the programmatic level.
Correct.
And this accompanies then all the work that,
Right, so that
has to happen.
they would have their, and just to give you an example, in the program we looked at this morning, they're also going through another process at the same time. That's why I wanted to stress that this was in the final approval. This was just approval of the distance ed component of the doctoral program. So there, yes, you're correct. It has to go through that other process as well.
Okay, maybe I've gotten confused. So the new doctoral degree program, this is for a brand new doctorate program that's going to be offered basically face-to-face only.
Correct.
Okay. The new one that you're proposing would be if it is a brand new doctoral program that they also want to use distance ed from the outset.
Correct.
Or if they already have an existing face-to-face doctorate program and they want to add a distance ed element.
That would be, if the second one, the latter, the second one would be the one that we have.
Use this one.
That's correct.
Okay.
The distance ed. If you already have an existing program, and maybe I should have done that before. I was just drawing, I was just showing you where I got this new one.
Face-to-face from
Right.
DE. Okay.
So if you have an existing one, now, there's different ways. You have online, you have also off-campus, face-to-face. I'll give you an example. If you already have if you have an existing program, and for the first time you want to have an off-campus face-to-face component of it, That one, if it's for the first time you're doing off-campus face-to-face, that one comes to the Ltac. If you already have an existing program, and we've already given you approval to offer it off-campus face-to-face, and you want to add an additional site, that's different. It doesn't need to come in front of the Ltac. So these are the only ones that would have to come.
So this is just the one if it's combined. If you want to do the face-to-face with an online degree, that's what we're looking at.
Or if you wanted to have it just online at its onset, and that's the way the program is going to be delivered, that would be fine too.
Okay.
If it has any, if it's brand new and it has any distance ed components, it would be that first one.
What I can see is going to be really important is getting the name right for the
Yeah.
form. Because new distance education, I mean, it's kind of new doctoral degree proposal plus distance learning, something that kind of, because new at the beginning of that form name implies distance education, but maybe not new doctoral program. So I think that naming will help that. And of course, the stuff in the gray box will contextualize it, but people usually don't read stuff in gray boxes. They'll read that form name, and so anything you can do to make that unambiguous, that'll be really helpful.
Okay. Work on the title first.
Right, and along that lines, you might want to say add on a DE component to it. And I think that would make more sense. Okay, I already have it. I'm adding on a DE component or a brand new with any DE component. And I think that might kind of clarify it in the title.
Andrew, on kind of a related note, I wonder, we had Dr. Kay Shelton here that showed us the quality scorecard that she has given to OLC to allow us to implement, at least for members to implement. And I wonder if you have looked at that, because it's the scorecard for the administration of online programs, and look at that as a reference for the things that this contains. Because I know this has been around for a long time, and I don't know if we have benchmarked it with other things that have come out more recently that are being used on the practitioner side to monitor quality, to implement quality. I'm going to undertake something like this at UNT now, because for all levels of our approvals for programs, because I'm not sure that what we're using now, it had lots of old SAC stuff that was really rigid, and still have to meet those, but kind of create a matrix of here's what we have, here's the principles of good practice from the state, here's the online quality scorecard, and see how it informs our process, because maybe there's things we need to put in for our institution. Maybe there's some things that are just busy work for the departments and don't really add to the management of a quality online program.
You will like our agenda item number 10.
I was going to say we almost had this exact same conversation not too long ago. I agree with you. However, I'm reserved on which way I should go, because we were on agenda item number 10. We had something we wanted to express to you. It's the same thing. In fact, it's the same thing you just mentioned. The good principles of good practice. That's what we're going to talk about. I'm not sure if maybe we want to tackle this in the same manner.
Well, I think that because all of these forms, one of the requirements is that they adhere to the principles of good practice. That agenda number, item number 10 is what we're talking about, is revising that to be in line with some of the newer documentation that's come out. So I think it actually addresses it. You don't actually need to change the form, because there still is within the form that you're going to have to adhere to the principles. And if we revise the principles, I think would be safe there.
Yes, Dr.
In looking at your packet, I'm on page 8 and page 9 under the additional distance delivery considerations. Under section B, administrative oversight, the penultimate bullet is how will sustained faculty student and student student interaction be facilitated? You have similar questions on page 9 under the student interactions, and so I didn't know whether that particular question is really an administrative oversight issue as much as it is really promoting sustained quality student interaction. So just because you have related questions, I thought I would just point to that. And if you wanted to move one to the other side, because they align in terms of the student engagement piece. That's just for your consideration.
Oh, no, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
And then I want to kind of play devil's advocate for a moment with almost keeping them separate to keep the administrative side thinking about this up front as they go through this administrative. And I understand the separation because I believe that this is sometimes not thought about at the higher level. So just, and while I'm talking, why is this in red over here on page 9, number 6?
I'm glad you said that. I didn't like my wording on that. So so if you have any suggestions, you can let me know if you like something better. I had brought that up to some of my colleagues, and I wasn't all the way happy with it. So I just left it in red, so something that you might want to look at and give me some other feedback on it. Okay. But let me clarify your question, or for the administrative structure. Are you saying that you'd much rather have that towards the beginning of the application, or is that? Or
no, I'm saying the way you have it separated, I understand it. I understand what she was saying about moving it. They seem similar, but I understand why they're separated.
Oh, okay.
So we've just thrown that at you. So
okay, that's fine.
Figure it out.
I don't know if we could ask the question any differently, but I agree they should be separate, but I'm thinking right, because the first one is asking almost like infrastructure. Are you guys going to support WebEx or Collaborate or kind of the infrastructure to maintain that student interaction? Whereas under the student interaction, that's more of the classroom instructional strategies to maintain student to student, student to faculty interaction. And so maybe we want to add kind of how you support an infrastructure that maintains to get at those types of issues versus the classroom strategies.
Well, in the bullet point before it under B, administrative oversight, you've got a platform question. So maybe that's the better way to ask it, is if there's a platform delivery system for that interaction.
But I want to just ask, Charlene, were you talking about it from an infrastructure support, or were you talking about it from a philosophical, the administration needs to keep a spotlight on? Because if it's the latter, I worry that it's getting buried under administrative oversight in terms of a kind of heading, just because all of the other ones are related to structure. So I'm not disputing your point that you want to have a spotlight, but if we put it in infrastructure, that kind of philosophy is not an infrastructure issue. It really is fundamental to how we believe the program should be run.
And I'm actually both.
Okay.
So I do want it to be, I understand the infrastructural side. I'm concerned when you say that and administrative is like, oh, that's IT or that's another place. But I want this philosophically looked at this level, because sometimes they forget this piece of it, and I like the way it's here, even though it still can be reworded maybe differently.
Okay.
And actually, that's one of the things that struck me in terms of why the principles need it to be revised is, we have the new federal regulations that are focusing on interaction as well. And so again, if we're revising that, maybe we need a greater emphasis on how are you going to address each of the principles. And so not only that we revise it, but that they actually demonstrate within the application how they are upholding the principles. Not that I would want them to write a sex report or something horrible like that, but along those lines. And so that might address some of that issues as well.
Well, and do we need to take a deeper look at this? I mean, I think we're all kind of just scanning it and so forth, but maybe it would be beneficial if we had a chance to have that discussion of the best practices first, and then take this back, look at it, and you give us a date to give you feedback based on the discussions from there. Because I think right now we're saying a lot of the similar things, but I'm very hopeful that we'll have a lot of clarity by the end of the discussion at the end of the day, or at least a new direction. So I'm thinking maybe we should have this discussion after we have that one. And give us a little bit of time to actually look through it, look at how questions are worded, interpretation, and so forth. Because I think right now we're skimming, and it would be better if we had some more dedicated time.
I think it's a good point, because the very first thing, A, is adherence to the principles of good practice, and the next agenda item is, are we adhering to the right things now, and are those principles still what we really want to be, looking at? Because these were written quite a while ago, so. Should I segue to agenda item 10? Because I think that really is, your thinking is following the thinking that the three of us had in a phone call about a month ago when we were talking about what ought to be on this agenda for this morning. And as we look back, these principles of good practice, the ones here were updated the last time, March 2010. 5 years ago, a lot has changed in the online world and in the delivery of educational technology and online learning. And these original principles go back to something that was originally adopted a number of years ago, far more than 5 years ago. Principles of good practice were first really written by Witchy. And Witchy kind of set it out there. These are the principles of good practice. And we really didn't know a whole lot about online. It was truly in its newborn stage. I have a newborn grandson right now, so I understand the difference between newborn, infancy, and then childhood. And I think when these were written, they were really in the newborn stage. We really, they're very, they're important, but they're kind of surface level kinds of things. We really have evolved, and as Patrick pointed out when Kay Shelton was here at our last meeting, she has now developed what is really being adopted nationally as the standard for the administrative side, and that's the quality scorecard. Quality Matters is really what's being adopted nationally. It's not a requirement, but it's what most institutions are looking towards if they're trying to determine if the quality of the course itself is right. Now, the Quality Matters does not look at whether the content is correct, but it's looking at, is this the best way to deliver online courses? Is this the best way to make sure your students are engaged? Is this the way you lay out a course in templates and stuff like that? So there are kind of two national standards that are evolving out there, documents, and both of those have really come on strong after, certainly, these were first written, and even after these practices of principles of good practice were adopted and revised back in actually 5 years ago this month. So what we were suggesting in the conference call that we had is that we went back and really take a look at these. And what I'm thinking is if we wanted to spend a few minutes looking this over and then talking about it, and then perhaps we would form a subcommittee to really take all the recommendations back from this group, work on it again, and then present something to us at our next meeting so that we go back then as we're developing all of these other new documents that we're referencing, if they're following the principles of good practice, that the principles of good practice really are what we now believe is the updated principles that we would want institutions to adhere to. Does that all make sense? And yeah, it is more work for us, but truly, I think we do need to make sure that we're asking institutions to take a look at this, that they're looking at the right thing and referencing that, particularly if you've got a new program out there that is not only a new program but doesn't even have the distance component. You're going to have people that aren't really sure what they're talking about, and this is again pretty generic. And if you looked at this, you'd go, oh, yeah, I'm doing that, but there really aren't any checklists, are you specifically doing it? So if we want to just kind of get into a little conversation, I'll pass it to Michelle real quickly, because she had some input to that, too.
I also wanted to add one of the other concerns that Dr. Lofter's have raised about this. Programs that are offering courses or degrees at a distance is not just online. It's also for the off-campus face-to-face, and they're being asked to adhere to these principles as well. And so we want to also make sure that some of the off-campus face-to-face best practices are also incorporated. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else to that, but we want to, if we're going to revise this, we want to make sure either we have two separate ones or we combine it to make sure that we're addressing both of those aspects of distance ed.
I would like to address that. The reason that the principles came up in our meeting when we had the original conference call was that one of my colleagues, as they were going through the approval process of an off-campus face-to-face form, as they were reviewing the write-up from the program director, noticed that we were asking them to confirm that they are adhering to the principles of good practice. But it's an off-campus face-to-face program, but the principles of good practice that we had all said electronically. So he started to ask, why are we asking the off-campus face-to-face program if they're adhering to electronically delivered course principles? So that made me dig into where the principles actually came from, and I talked to Van Davis. And Van explained to me that the principles originated, well, the document that we had originated from Ltac. So I determined, okay, since it originated here, I need to bring it back here in order to get it revised. And that's how we got to this point right now.
So one place we could start is, there are a whole set of principles that I think would apply much more to that off-campus face-to-face standard, like library services and security at that off-campus site that aren't really addressed obviously in this. So would we want two separate documents, or so that it would be easier if you're applying for this, you adhere to this or this, and they would kind of address it? Or do we want to incorporate it all into one document? Because I really think, especially with distance ed, those are two different cats. And then the other thing, as we're going through and looking at perhaps revising the principles, as Pam mentioned, it was originally based on WICHE and then also incorporating some of the SAC standards. But since that time, we have the new authorizations regarding identification of students and other issues that have come up. I think using the OLC document would be a good place to start. It crosswalks very nicely to SACS. It's really reflecting current research in the area. It already does incorporate a lot of the same ideas that are in Quality Matters in the instructional area. And so kind of forming it around that document might be the best place to start. And I told them I'd be willing to chair a subcommittee. If there's a group of you who are really interested in this, we can have a couple of conference calls where we walk through them and make some suggestions. Because I know you may not have thought about it at this time yet.
Well, and I think there's an additional group that directly deals with the distance. Your regional councils probably do need input in what we're talking about, or at least maybe have some insight into it. I know that when we meet, we have programs that are starting at different sites. And again, looking at the best practices, we've had those exact same questions. Well, we're not offering any online courses. We're just at a different site. I mean, we're doing exactly the same thing we're doing at main campus, just here. And of course, those. So I think maybe some input from those groups as well would be beneficial as we engage in the conversation. I would be more than willing to assist in serving on that committee as well. But having gone through SACS, yesterday was our departing review visit. I have that very fresh in my mind, but I think aligning that so that you don't have that dual work of having to do, this for the coordinator, this for my distance program, this for SACS. So if we can streamline that as easily as possible, we are all extremely busy. Any assistance that we can provide administratively with paper would definitely help out.
And I know Kay has already provided, I don't know if all of you have seen a full crosswalk from the OLC kind of best practices along with to the SACS standard. So if we aligned with that document, it aligns to SACS, and so that might actually be a good place to start.
And I would suggest to the subcommittee, too, that I'm sure Kay Shelton would be happy to participate in any conference calls that you had, because she's obviously very committed to this. She did it and, has just seen it implemented all across the country. And she knows places that have probably adopted it where they're getting the best pickup on it, best understanding. She's even seen it go so far as some institutions are actually then posting, if they did follow the quality scorecard, posting their scores online so that students can see what's happening, faculty can see it as well. So I think she could probably offer us best practices of the implementation of the quality scorecard as well. And Michelle is right. When the scorecard first came out, it was trying to address course standards, but now it's if you're already doing quality matters, it fits into quality scorecard, and then I would think what we would be doing is making sure it fits into and covers everything that we want to be happening at the state level. And this form, last word is electronically, but I can see how it's gotten confused with those that are off campus face to face. Why are we doing this too? So I think you've got a good point there. Maybe there's another form, or else if you are only off campus face to face, don't do parts B and C, only do part D. And so, there could still be one form, but very clear. If it's only face to face, this is what you fill out, and don't worry about the other parts to that. But I think these principles apply only to electronic delivery. So that would be, it's going to be some work, and there might be people like you, Michelle, that have done both pieces, that there might be somebody else that we need to get feedback from the committee. So we have the two Michelles that are volunteering, one to chair it and one to serve on that committee. Is there anybody else that would like to work on that?
I would also be very happy to.
Okay, Kimberly?
Patsy?
Okay.
Do we want to assign any of those that aren't here? If you're online, Pam, we can still hear from you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I think Andrew said only one subcommittee per member.
Okay, yeah, and you've got yours, good. Okay.
Oh, and Patsy has hers, so okay.
This is Christina.
Christina, you'll...
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we took Patsy off because she's on the subcommittee for the doctoral applications.
I was actually just making that up.
That was going to be your rule. Patsy can break your rule then.
Okay, I think it's a great learning opportunity.
Yes.
I agree.
So Patsy's back on. And still add Christina, yes. I think that's good. There's... That'll be 5 of us. It's a good cross-section.
I'd like to see maybe another university on there, though, that might really have.
Oh, good.
Good, we've got one over there.
Charlene, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
I just want to go through the names one more time. I have Michelle Betancourt, Michelle Duran, Kimberly Gibson, Patsy LeMaster, Christina Cross, and Charlene. Charlene Stubblefield.
Pam, I have a philosophical question about moving towards something that aligns with the quality scorecard. And so the philosophical part of it is, right now, what we basically approve here and at our institutions many times are blueprints. We all know that blueprints are very different from the house that you're going to walk into and, gosh, the water doesn't run or something doesn't drain. So if we look at something that we align the blueprint with what many people are moving towards, measuring whether it's inhabitable, I think that's a big step forward. But then how do we, besides just voluntarily people saying, yeah, here's my scorecard, how do we gain some impetus, not to make it a requirement, but to encourage that as a best practice for, yeah, okay, here's your blueprint, but maybe there's some expectation that as you're able to, you demonstrate how you're doing.
Comments on that? That's a good point. I mean, there might be a line where if you do follow the scorecard, check here, and that's all we have to know. But there might be some specific things that even if you don't want to adopt the scorecard for whatever reason, we still want to make sure that you adhere to, these principles. So, I mean, I think this is probably a pretty big task. It is huge, yeah.
Well, going back to the application, it simply says, provide a statement to the Chief Academic Officer certifying adherence to the principles of good practice. That's how I certify I adhere to the principles of good practice. I think that maybe that needs to be expanded out, a brief, if we keep it short and sweet, or at least down to the fundamentals, that rather than just saying, yes, I do, you briefly state how you do or how you anticipate you will. What practice are you going to put in place I think, is that what you're?
I think so. I mean, there are probably lots of options out there to explore. One of the ways that might help in particular is that if a provost or president has to sign off on something saying that you're doing it, you may be able to leverage that for resources you need to address things like accessibility, which can be expensive to caption everything, and nobody wants to pay for it. And so if it is part of something that you have to certify you're doing, you got to pay for it. You got to find a way to do it.
Other comments from committee members?
Does anyone know how far along Kay is with the new piece she's working on with ADA and the scorecard? They're making an ADA scorecard. And perhaps we do want to contact her and build some of that, just because I know that is a issue I think we all are struggling with right now institutionally.
And I know faculty are really concerned about that piece.
Yes, yes. And I know she's working on a new ADA scorecard that the last conference I saw her at, she said it was supposed to be ready sometime this year.
If it would please the committee, when it would be time to host the committee meeting, maybe we do it through a conference call, which I'm sure we probably will. Maybe I can facilitate it so that Kay would also be
yes,
a participant in there. I can try.
Yeah.
Give it a good try. Try to get her in there.
I'm still in close contact with her. I'm sure I can help on that. Yeah, she is really now, I mean, they're expanding it into Spanish. They're taking it to other continents. Lots of countries are beginning to adopt it. So it has worked. And again, she put it together with input from professionals on what is important. And so it has validity in how it was built, and it's getting more validity with the amount of users. So it's kind of like the analytics piece. The more information you get in, the stronger it becomes. So I really do believe she'd probably be glad, more than happy.
May I state or say something about going back to what Michelle was saying about just getting the chief academic officer to kind of check off. Sometimes in a lot of institutions, and I don't know if this is the case in your institutions, but the Office of Distance Education is not necessarily under that chief academic officer. And so this is the office that provides the support, provides the faculty development, trainings, and perhaps now with the ADA, we've also, kind of take over the captioning and, all of that good stuff. So perhaps consideration will be that, yes, the chief academic officer checks off on this, but perhaps there's a box there where the Office of Distance Education, whoever that might be, is also, kind of informed or, asked to certify or verify or check off that box.
That's a very good point.
And let me tell you where that part of the form that says that the chief academic officer certifies that these principles are being adhered to. If you look there was a form inside your packet that says certification form for electronically delivered and off-campus education programs. This is what we require all the institutions to submit in any distance ed proposal that they're saying they're going to admit. And that's why it just says provide a statement. That this form is basically, if you look at it, is the statement. Because on the back it has the chief academic officer when it signs for it. That's where that came from. So I understand where you're saying maybe you want to have an expansion of, instead of just having the form that signifies it or certifies it, but they actually give some detailed information on how they're going to do it.
Can I just add on to one of the things that I've seen is that once it comes down to from the blueprint to the actual we see a lot of faculty that are asked to develop these courses. who have never taught online before. And so this is putting them at a very awkward situation because they feel that, they do have the knowledge and, of course, they're experts in that field. However, they lack the technical expertise, the know-how. And this is where we do this very nice pairing them up with a designer, an instructional designer. And so those are the type of things that I'm talking about, that if we at least know ahead of, when you answer that question, about the faculty, has the faculty gone through some sort of a certification, professional development? And they're saying, yes, they have. However, when it comes down to who's going to be developing the courses, that's when we see that there's work that needs to be done. So I see this as an excellent opportunity to improve the quality, not only the quality of the new doctoral programs coming down the pike, but also of distance education and online. Definitely. Thank you.
Good discussion. Anybody else? I think there's, since Patrick kind of brought it up, this is an important issue, and it's now come at us from one discussion, now two discussions, and then agreement from the total committee that this needs to be looked at. So I think this is very important work for us to go through, and like you're saying, it'll be real helpful to improving overall and helping those that are developing new programs know where to go, what to be doing. So be good work. What is a reasonable time to look at when we would like to have the first draft of this? By our next meeting? Do we have a next meeting scheduled, or is that something we will be looking at? A summer meeting? Okay. And that may determine when the meeting is to give you enough time to start to work on this. So, Michelle, you want to give us an estimate on first drafts, or?
Well, I think that's going to depend on how hard it is to get a meeting together. I think that it'll be very productive once we actually meet. But I know that coordinating schedules can be difficult. So depending on everybody's availability time, I think definitely by early summer, by May, June, if we were like having a summer meeting, that would be.
And this may be one of those things where you start pulling it together, but you need to have a workshop the day before, exactly. A face-to-face meeting the day before this meeting to really flesh it out. Because sometimes, even though we're all in the business of distance, sometimes it is helpful for these kinds of things to work together where you're looking back and forth at documents and pulling everything. So that might be one thing we look at is at the next meeting. That would be up to you, but just a suggestion that might be helpful.
Okay.
And I think we can take that into account when we start to look at the last agenda item when it says well, not the adjournment, but the future agenda items and future meetings. Then we can start to think what time frame we want to look at for the committee, and then we can start to look at when we want to have our full Ltac meeting.
Okay, good. All right, we'll add that to the agenda for item number 16. So, okay. We haven't had a break, so it's 11:30. You want to move on with one more agenda item, or lunch is here? You want to break now, since we've been going at it for an hour and a half? Okay, seems like a good time to break. So we will go ahead and have lunch and probably reconvene about 12:15.
I like that decision.
Okay?
Good decision.
It seemed like that. Time for pause. Do we have our telephone people on? We are looking, we did check to see if there is any problem with technical. We did get a report that some of the people listening in are getting a broken signal, so we hope that can get fixed for those that are
Pam is here.
joining us. Hi, Pam. Okay. We've got a few more out there, too, that I know are listening. We have Justin Lauder out in Lubbock that is also listening in. Hello, Justin, and thank you. We're going to move to the agenda item where we're going to be able to hear from somebody here at the coordinating board about an update on the innovation and policy development. And we would like to introduce Dr. Ginger Gossman, who is Senior Director, Innovation and Policy Development here. And I'll let Dr. Lofters introduce her again.
Well, I just wanted to bring down Ginger. The last time we spoke with Dr. Davis as well about competency-based education. He was over the innovation department. I can't remember his exact title here at the coordinating board. And now that same role will be underneath Dr. Gossman. And I want her just to come down and introduce herself to us at in the Ltac and to let us know what's going on in her area.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to talk with you about my new area. It is nascent. We're just a few months old. And really the mission of this small group, which will be myself and 2 other people, is to keep our fingers on the pulse of what's happening in higher education in terms of innovation and policy development. So that may be what's happening in our state, at our public or private institutions. It may be happening in other states. It may be happening internationally. And we need to keep our eyes on what's happening in other places and find out what's working in other places and might they help us serve Texas students. So that's really what we're trying to do. The 2 staff that will be under me will be starting in the next few months, and the person that I've recently hired to be Director of Innovation will be taking over most of what Van was looking at, what Dr. Van Davis was looking at. And that will include competency-based education. In fact, I just came from the competency-based education network meeting, which was this week in Austin, and I joined the team that's looking at assessment and issues surrounding assessment and competency-based education. I hope you're able to follow some of what this organization does, because I think it may impact some of your work. A lot of the competency-based education out there is online, and so that directly ties to your work. In fact, I listened as you were speaking about revising your best practices a little bit ago, and I'm hoping that will now incorporate some language related to competency-based education and address how that curriculum is delivered online, if not in hybrid or face-to-face, and what assessments might be appropriate related to that. I don't know how deeply you guys dig, but it may be some things for you to consider when you think about that language. Another way that the work my team does might relate to you is through the Higher Education Strategic Plan. So I'm involved in developing the goals and targets and strategies, as are the rest of the agency, for the new Higher Education Strategic Plan. One of the strategies that is listed in this plan is the use of data analytics to help serve students. And I think that may also relate to your work. That is a proposed strategy at this point. It hasn't been officially ratified. There's no ratification process. The board will approve the plan once it's done, but I think that's going to stay in the plan. And I'd love for you all to think about how you might assist with that work in the future, because you certainly know more about how implementing an analytics design or an overlaid software or programs that you already have that exist where you can pull analytics from, how that might serve your students. So hopefully that's another way that we can work together, and I hope that we will work together. And certainly if you have anything you think my team can help you with, we're happy to do that as well. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the Ltac knows that I will be working closely with Ginger. We've already have been since she's been in the adjacent division to mine. And I believe that our work, since it revolves around innovation and policy development, we work side by side. So I plan to let her know.
And
what
the
we're doing.
cross section between innovation and policy development. So, for example, one of the things that came up a number of times at the CBEN meeting was the inability of systems currently in place on campuses or at institutions that can't talk to each other, like Blackboard and student information systems, or Pearson if you're using any of their learning tools, and how they don't communicate at present, and what software, or I don't know that hardware would come into it, but what software might connect those, and what policies should surround the design or choice or selection of that software. So I think that may well become part of your work in the future, because we need to resolve those issues in and above competency-based education. I mean, CBEN is talking about those issues, but I'm imagining they are affecting all levels of learning at this point. So it may be that Texas is in a unique position because of you to help really guide how those systems should talk to each other in an effective way.
What is your background?
I was trained in demographics. So I have my doctoral degree from the University of Texas at Austin, where I graduated with a PhD in sociology. But I studied demography. So I was actually raised in health and studying public health outcomes. And then I changed from health to evaluation, really the evaluation of education programs. And that was in K-12. And then I came here.
And you said you have a department of 3, and what is, you've got a director of innovation?
Yes.
And another position too?
So I'm the senior director of innovation and policy development. So I have a director of innovation, and I'll have a director of policy development.
Okay.
We will be small but mighty.
Well, I think obviously the innovation side is something this group would be very interested in because, as you said, so many of the CBE programs are online. That's kind of the next big thing that's coming at us. We were discussing this at lunch, too. I mean, how we're going to incorporate all this and what it really means. And it's one of those things where there's a lot of talk, but a lot of uncertainty on how you enter this and how, is it going to be publishers? Is it going to be us? Is it going to be direct assessment? Is it going to be course-based CBE? All sorts of questions. So I would hope that you are a frequent speaker to this group so that we can keep up with your work, what you're working with too. So what are the new things on the horizon with the state from your position with CBE?
Well, that came up at CBEN where someone asked me, what are you going to roll this program out? And the 2 institutions that started a bachelor program through CBE were funded through an EDUCAUSE grant. So we did have external funding to start that work. I think that's a very good question. And what is on the horizon for CBE? Are we now well suited to find other funders who will help us keep moving forward with CBE? Because it takes a lot of starting capital. And both institutions sort of had to agree, just for the reality of the finances, that they would function in the red for a few years with the anticipation that success would bring them running into the black in maybe year 4 or 5. So it is a financial endeavor to start with. So we have to think about our resources at hand, and I think once the CBE program through South Texas College and Texas A&M Commerce show their success in a way that people can understand it, and that's part of our challenge actually right now is communicating that success, because even though they have framed their credentials on the semester credit hour, their term is 7 weeks long. So when we talk about the success of a term, it's in a much shorter time frame, and sometimes that language is not always calibrated with the way people are thinking about a term. And the subscription model that they're using, it's a flat rate tuition that includes fees and textbooks, and a student can advance as much as possible through that term, but there may be some hangover into the following term, particularly in math courses where students need a little bit more time to catch up on their thinking in a math frame of mind and completing their coursework there. So the onus is on us to communicate that success so that we can then build that into rolling this program out to other institutions. I hope I skirted that answer well enough. So I have great hopes, but at this point it is not particularly clear.
I think there are a lot of institutions here looking at all of that and wondering what is the step. So, are you a member of CBEN, or did you just attend because it was here in Austin?
Both. I probably would not have attended this meeting had it not been in Austin because the transition from Van to myself was so quick. But yes, the coordinating board has membership in CBEN because of our role in the development of the CBE programs at the two institutions. And I am hopeful we will remain a member because I think we have a valuable voice. We're the only state organization there when we attend.
Do you see yourself in a position of continuing to help other schools that roll out like A&M Commerce and the others, or are you just going to be kind of watching and advising and regulating or whatever?
That's a good question, and we haven't quite determined that. We are well poised to help institutions build out programs, particularly when I believe STC and Texas A&M Commerce will act as mentors as well for other institutions who want to attempt this, or hopefully successfully could attempt this. But whether or not my group will be the direct implementers from the coordinating board, I don't know. I do think someone from the coordinating board would be part of that, but I don't know if it would be my group. And partly that's because Van was very involved in the day-to-day work of all of the development, and it was incredibly detailed. It was basically his life for 2 years, and that's not the mission of my group. Sort of the mission of my group is to not hit the microphone, but think up here so that the agency can dig in down here. So I don't know how much digging we'll actually do. But that may evolve.
Well, it does sound like you're a small but mighty group. At least you've got a lot of big things on the forefront. Can you say a little bit more about the predictive analytics and analytics? That again, there are so many things that are hitting us, and we've got another discussion on the agenda about things that, in some cases, the vendors are driving these solutions, and we don't even know what the real questions are. So we're all like, do we adopt this? We don't adopt this. Why would we adopt this, or why wouldn't we adopt this? What are you going to do with analytics?
So the Higher Education Strategic Plan has 4 main goals, and the first goal is educational attainment, and the second goal is completion. And analytics would fit well into both of those. I think the strategy is listed under completion, but it's really going to influence all 4 goals. The other 2 are marketable skills, and then student debt. And I can talk about those if you'd like me to. But the way the strategy is proposed in the plan is to say we're interested in finding ways to keep students just in time, staying on top of how they're advancing through their coursework. So a way that students could look very quickly at a profile and say, ooh, I didn't realize that I have a math credit left and I need to take care of that this term or I'm going to fall behind. And keeping their trajectory on course with what the institution is offering at the same time. Like, oh, you need this psych course, but it's not going to be offered for another 2 semesters, so you really need to do what you need to do to get into it this time. So we're thinking about that kind of analytics where it would help a student stay on top of their trajectory. But the strategies in the plan, in a way, are written vaguely, and they're written vaguely for a reason, because we don't want them to be prescriptive, and we don't want them to be directives. What we want for them to be is suggestions for institutions to implement as needed, as long as it fits their student population and their program design. So the strategy as now is sort of, as I said, vague, but it's because we hope that institutions will read it, take it to heart, and then just run with it. So I can tell you what we think might happen, but because I've seen some analytics, I saw a demonstration from Austin Community College and what they're showing students, and it's very polished and very attractive. I know one of the barriers to using analytics is that students don't always log into their account and look. So how do you how do you change that? And I think that's part of the shift we're seeing in higher ed, is not just changing the way administrators and faculty think about higher ed, but students too.
Questions?
I'm curious, who all is involved in authoring the strategic plan for higher ed? And does it involve institutional voices as well, or is it kind of solely a coordinating board activity?
I like to think that nothing is solely a coordinating board activity, and I do genuinely believe that. We have a core staff in the coordinating board that have been drafting the plan, but we also have an advisory committee that meets once a month. Now, this advisory committee is comprised of people who have extensive experience in higher education, but who are not at present committed to a particular institution. So we have former chancellors, former trustees, or former boards of regents, people who would be well versed in higher education in our state, but wouldn't be overly biased when they come to the table to talk about the plan. So the agency's staff are advancing the conversation, are presenting text, suggesting the targets and strategies, and then the advisory committee is sort of debating that and thinking through, how will this affect my community? Is it realistic for my community? And bringing back to us concerns. And we are trying to use a tool that our external relations department has developed called College Town Hall Texas to engage external folks and not just external folks, but institutions and anyone else who might be a stakeholder, to try and get their feedback on the plan. So far, we haven't got a lot of people involved in that. We're not really sure how to get more people to log into College Town Hall and leave comments for us, but anyone is welcome to email anyone on staff and say, here's what I think. Because the goal, we have published the draft on College Town Hall, Texas. And right now the draft is just the goals, the targets, and the strategies. What we are actually drafting out a larger plan, a narrative that accompanies that.
Anything else? Like we said, we hope that you are a frequent visitor with us, because I think there's just, I think you have a piece of everything we're going to have to be dealing with in the future. So good luck and thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we go back up to the agenda item number 5 that we skipped over to move to after lunch? And this is the update on the institutional survey of learning technologies, which Patrick is heading up and has really spent a lot of time along with Andrew in trying to roll this thing out. So Patrick, I will hand it to you.
Thank you. And Andrew had a quick question. Do you know if Ginger has seen this? Because I kept thinking as she was talking about innovation and leveraging tools that are already being used by institutions, that might be helpful for her to have seen it at least, and maybe even have some input into it.
Well, now that you mentioned that, I guess it would have been, no, she hasn't, not at this point. But I guess after we talk about it here at this meeting, I'll present it to her as well.
Very good. I appreciate that. So apologize for the format that this is in, but very much appreciate that it's in a format at all. And thank you, Cindy. Where's Cindy? She's not with us right now. Upstairs. She's watching us, I know. Thank you, Cindy. So I got the changes yesterday, and it looked like there was just one typo that was caught. And I wrote back to Andrew and said, well, it doesn't look like we need to discuss much. And then he got back to me and said, yeah, there are little sticky notes that are attached to that PDF. And I couldn't see it on my mobile device, but when I got back to the hotel, sure enough, lots of sticky notes. So Cindy was gracious enough to print this out, and then what you'll see inside, wherever there was a sticky note, it's on the facing page. I think that continues throughout. Yeah, it does. So what I wanted to do is I did take some time and triage these. Many of them are not things we need to discuss. I have a color-coded copy here on the computer of those sticky notes. Some of them are now red, and ones that we will talk about, and others we will just move right through. So without further hesitation, let's go ahead and open up to the first two facing pages there. So let's see. So there was a question about, are you sure you want unknown as a response, and who will primarily be sent this survey? And that was for what plagiarism prevention tools are used at your institution for writing assignments, if any. Do we want unknown as a possibility? I think that might be a way people would want to answer, that they don't know, but they don't want to say none necessarily, or we can just eliminate that as an option. Thoughts? And, we don't have to have consensus or vote on everything, just first person who feels strongly about it. I'd love to hear from you.
Are you really asking there, I don't know whether there is a plagiarism tool, or I don't know what is the plagiarism tool?
Don't know if there is one, whether it exists at all. So none would be, doesn't exist. Unknown would be, yeah, I think there's something, but I don't know what the name of it is, or it's not widely used, or...
I think if we remove unknown, people who would have tended to put unknown thinking they have something, but they're not sure, then they might choose other and just not specify anything.
Okay.
So I think
I'll go with that. Thank you. And there are several places where there is an other, and there's a question of whether or not they can specify. There's a space, a gap between entries. That's where the field was that people could enter their other, but it wasn't clear to the person who reviewed it. So that one is not an issue at all. And who would be sent this survey? It's going to go to chief academic officers with the encouragement to send it to the person responsible for distance education on the campus. So most likely it should be the type of people that serve on Ltac that are getting this and providing the information. Okay, on campus or on dash campus, I don't know. I'm going to go look that up and see what people generally do there. Okay, moving on to page 3 and the sticky notes there. We already mentioned that the open-ended responses are allowed. They're just wasn't clear on the copy being reviewed. The next note is about the how are you creating, storing, and disseminating course-related videos? Please mention any vendors or services you are using. The reviewer said, would they be interested in knowing if they are public or private system or services, or even in-house? When I said please mention any vendors or services you are using, it doesn't necessarily indicate that you should make that differentiation. Is that important to folks? Should we ask whether it's in-house or... And when you say creating, storing, disseminating, those could be 3 very separate processes. Yeah. And really, I think they will be there. They are handled in such unique ways on campuses. I really wanted to just know, what are you doing now, instead of saying, are you using YouTube and Vimeo, or are you using Kaltura or whatever? And I'm probably not aware of a lot of the other solutions people are using. So I wanted that to be as open-ended as possible.
What about adding in, please mention any vendors, services, or in-house?
Very good.
So do you expect in a response to this open-ended to have them just speak about what they do know, either in creating, storing, or disseminating, or that they would actually respond to each of those different component parts? I mean, to the point that,
that they are different.
They have different answers, and I don't know that I have an opinion if I were responding to this, but I'm just trying to think then, if on the end user side, as we start to do and dig into the analysis, which is the way that you're going to get the most helpful information coming back to review.
Sure.
I don't know if you can break it down. So, for instance, if you're using Kaltura, you might use that for all 3 of those. But if you are, kind of use Screencast-O-Matic or Camtasia to develop them, but then we store it on a faculty streaming video, server. I think the the purpose of leaving it vague like this is to really try to capture all of those responses, because I don't know if you really can combine it or make separate questions.
And I think viewing this as a first-time survey, that there may be a clear indication from the responses we get that we can ask it in a better way next year, or that maybe we can even identify independent choices that they can make and see where people are moving. But it's a good point. There's a note about alpha order. I added Google Hangouts to the next question as a choice just at the end, so it violated the alpha order. So I'll make sure to restore that.
I'm even surprised that Adobe Connect did not make the list, but the Google Hangouts did. Was there a specific reason why?
Well, Adobe Connect is now, so thank you for suggesting that. And it's at the top of the list. Yeah, I think a lot of people who have adopted Canvas there also.
And there are two others.
Blue Jean Networks. Now, Blue Jean Networks, that's more of a video conferencing standard. I don't think it does the, I mean, it's working on all kind of things.
Right.
We're a customer of them. But I don't know that they're doing the polling yet.
Okay.
The whiteboards, those kind of things, breakout rooms. So I think I will leave Blue Jeans off for web conferencing, but it might appear under other for some folks.
Okay.
All right, the next page, page 4. Let's see which one that is actually referring to. That top note on page 4 is actually referring to e-portfolio tools, whether or not we'd be interested in seeing if they're implementing those in the next 12 months like I have with some others. I think that would be fine to add that as an option. So the one about open educational resources, the response there was that, and the question goes, is your institution or our individual faculty using open free educational course materials? The response was, this is very broad. Are we interested in whether the institution is promoting faculty use of open education material to help lower cost of materials to students? What's the goal of the question? Perhaps rephrased to make this an estimate of percentage of faculty that use open ed materials. And with that response, first the question is not worded very well on my part. Is your institution or our individual faculty? So if either one of those is happening, you should say yes and then describe. But it's certainly not exclusive. So what are your thoughts about what do we want to know about either the promotion of OER or the current use of it? I think I have a good idea that the current use isn't probably as aggressive as we'd like to see it, but that may not be true at all institutions either, and that faculty may be using it without knowing. I think there was a recent survey that demonstrated that they said, no, we're not using it, and then they went on to describe what some it was, and they gave lots of instances of how they were. Michelle?
I was just going to say, I think the discussion of this the last time, we basically all agreed we didn't know a better way to answer it, and we were going to send this out there as is, and hopefully the responses would drive a better way to ask it in the future, because it is all over the board.
Yeah.
But I think we had that exact same discussion the last time.
So there's introduced legislation, some or if not all of you may know already in the current session, that would start a study group on open education resources. So it may, depending on how much traction that has or doesn't have, but that's actually a proposal I believe in the House right now.
Could we get some more information on that, Andrew, perhaps from John Wyatt? And it seems like something that would be very interesting to this group.
Yes. You want me to try to get him down here today? I can look and see if I see the actual bill.
Either way, if we could get more information, I don't know if we'd be prepared to discuss it anyway, but there's something moving forward on that we would sure like to know.
Let me see what
So the first step is a study group, because I was asked to comment it from my institution, as they're sending it around the network. And I don't have it on my phone, but if there's someone in the legislative office that could dig it up and at least send it. Otherwise, I'm happy to send it, Andrew, to you and send it out to the group over the weekend, either way.
Sure, that'd be fine. If you can send it to me, I can get with John.
Because this is pretty time sensitive, right?
Yeah, that's already been, it's a proposed bill.
Introduced?
Introduced, and so we'll see if it gets out.
Just curious, anybody
yeah.
else here aware of that?
No. But I can look it up. While we're talking, I'll look it up and see if I can find something on it.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
On a side, Andrew, is it possible to have a list of the current things that are going on that are applicable directly to us like this? We didn't know anything about it, but I know that there's a list somewhere that he mentioned, but I know he's going to send it to you. But if we can kind of get timely just, hey, this is coming, even just a quick FYI, so that we can find out from our campuses who is aware and who's not, so that we can be more abreast of what's coming up. That'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Patrick, on the OER question, could we possibly ask them to describe the OER initiatives that they're aware of on their campus? And, is there an institutional initiative, or is it sporadic faculty use? Because I could probably tell you if there's sporadic faculty use, but I might, I don't know. Or I could tell you if there's a strategic initiative at the institution level to promote adoption. So maybe if we ask them to describe how, what they're aware of, and multiple select as opposed to, is it this or this or this? Because at our campus, it's a combination. We have some institutional pushes. We have some sporadic faculty use that isn't.
What the choices are right now are yes, and then a request to please describe it, and it's got an open-ended box there. Would you suggest leading them a little bit more? Please describe and indicate if institutional or faculty-based?
I think so, because then we have the descriptions, but then we could also quantify, because if we have the select boxes available, then we could say how many institutions selected them. Whereas if it's all in the description, it's going to be a little bit harder.
So are you suggesting maybe just make it 2 questions?
2 boxes.
Yeah, I mean, is it institutional or is that individual faculty use? Because I would just bet everybody's going to have some individual faculty use.
I would think.
But institutional may have a bigger purpose. We're trying to adopt stuff to save students money.
Yeah. Is there a coordinated
we're
initiative at your institution? And then please describe.
I like that.
And then sporadic faculty use, they could probably assume.
Yeah, like you said, they're probably using it and they might not even know.
Exactly.
There's probably lots of it we don't know.
Yeah, but a coordinated initiative, it'd be nice to know who's doing that and how.
Okay. So 2 yeses, 1, and they can mark them both.
Yeah.
Yes, institutional coordinated strategic initiative, or yes, faculty. Do you want to say sporadic faculty use or
individual faculty use?
Some individual faculty use.
But describe on each one.
Yeah, and open-ended box for describing each one. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Do we know what the state's purpose is in looking at this? Is it to try to save students money?
That was the motivation on that.
No textbooks and stuff like that?
So the next one that there was a response on, do we know the type of incentives? And that was relative to whether or not an institution has incentives for faculty to teach online. And 2 choices were yes, please describe, or no. I think if I'm reading between the lines here, this suggestion would be to enumerate some of the possible incentives so that people could go ahead and code it. This was one, again, I think, where people are handling it in so many different ways that I'd rather just get them to describe it, code it, and then next time have specific responses. But anybody feel strongly that we should go ahead and try to identify some buckets of incentives? Okay, I'm going to move on then. Thank you. Silence sometimes is just as important as conversation. Okay, moving on to page 5. The first note is about accelerated courses. Let me see where it is here. Yeah, do you offer online courses in accelerated format within long semesters? If so, explain. And the question was, do you mean compressed, same content in a shorter time span, or truly accelerated, only provide what is needed, but some elements of curriculum might be left out? And I think that I think that's just a different understanding of how we use accelerated versus compressed. We have particular programs at UNT that we call accelerated that are 8-week instead of full semester, but they're within a long semester. But they don't leave any of the learning objectives out in order to do that in 8 weeks. So what is the vernacular that you're most used to for courses that are shorter but taught within your typical long terms? Call them compressed, accelerated.
Those are just variations of many 14-week, or how about listing out the main ones? 14, 12, 8,
5.
5, 3.
Sounds like it should just be every number, right?
Yeah.
But I mean,
Anything over 3 weeks.
It's
Yeah.
3, 5. You do 4.
See, there you go.
I do think that's a good question, though, because we do have some classes we take the whole thing and just put it into 8 weeks. So it's not really accelerated; it's just shorter, But then there are some faculty that are saying, "I cannot teach everything that I teach in a 16 weeks in 8 weeks, so I'm leaving out exercises or something to make sure that the student can get through it." So I don't, I don't know that answers your question, but I think that is a good question because I think they're different.
So if we wanted to capture most of them, so we could say, check all that apply, and I heard 3, 4, 5, 6. Ready at 7?
7.
This is a rabbit hole I didn't mean to go down.
6 to 8.
I would bet everybody's
10
gonna
to
check
12.
yeah.
And 14 and 16. Okay. Everybody does 16, I suppose. Huh?
Anybody above 16?
Yeah, we have 17.
Well, right, so if you're a professional school,
16
medical,
plus, maybe?
medical dental,
Yeah,
those are
ours are
super,
workforce, our
right, so
EMSP and our police academy are at 17.
That's not within a long semester because it's longer than a semester, right?
super
So how about 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12, and then 13 plus? Noting that if somebody has 12 and a half, they're going to have to make a decision. But all right, so that puts it into 4 buckets, and that makes it easier to kind of look at. Good. One other thing, do you offer online courses in accelerated format, and if so, explain. And I put in planning stages, launch within 12 to 18 months. That was inconsistent with everywhere else where I said within the next 12 months. I must have just been thinking it takes a little bit longer to launch a full program. But for consistency, I think it'd be fine to do 12 months. Anybody want to argue for 18 months? It's not particularly important, but something that the reviewer noted, and I'm glad to be consistent when I can. Okay, moving on to the next item about training. And this is one we talked about a lot last time, and I wrestled quite a bit with in trying to figure out how to get all the information we wanted. So first, I think we wanted to know, do you have required, and that was very important, required faculty training for teaching online courses? And then if so, how many hours are required? And we also identified training in 4 different areas. Well, 3 and another. Learning management system training, pedagogy training, and accessibility training. And then for each of those, I ask how many hours are required if you require it. And then finally, is the training available online? And this was the cleanest format I could get to gather all that information. If you would take a moment at that and see if, from your perspective for your institution, you could easily go through and answer it, or if I've not quite made it clear what we're trying to gather there. So the reviewer suggested that they would add the concept of the availability of training, that no training is not required, but training is accessible to faculty. And I think that's true in most cases, but what I was really interested in was the requirement piece. Is that the sense of the body, too, that we really want to know what's required, not just what's available? Okay. Well, we will leave that as is then. Yes.
So you have accessibility as in availability as opposed to accessibility
in
from
terms
ADA?
of ADA.
Okay.
Should I make that more explicit?
Well, I had just heard you talk about the availability part. Is training available? And I didn't want to get confused in my head because I
Availability
was
and
really
accessibility,
right.
yeah.
I read this as ADA, and that's what you intended. Correct?
I'm going to put a parenthetical there that
Okay.
says ADA. Yeah, thank you. All right, if we're comfortable with that, we'll move on. The next note was about the very next question. Do you provide other options for instructors to demonstrate their proficiency without completing your training? Christine, I think you mentioned this the last time, and so we added the recognition of external certifications, like they were trained how to do this somewhere else. Will you accept that as demonstration of competency? The reviewer's note was, what about other options that you haven't illuminated here? So I'm happy to add an other box just to make sure people can contribute things that we otherwise didn't really leave space for. Moving to page 7, do you determine a student's readiness for online learning? If so, please describe. And there's yes, please describe. No, we do not have a specific initiative. And other, and it's open-ended. And the reviewer's point was, what would be an example of an other response? I don't know. Maybe we don't need that, but
I wondered what a person would select if the answer was that the students do a self-assessment.
they'd say, yes, the students do a self-assessment, I guess. Or maybe it would be other, the students do a self-assessment.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a reason at least to not preclude people responding with something that they think is good to share but doesn't fit in the described category.
I'd be interested in a yes required before students can enroll in an online class. Yes, a self-assessment for students, or no. Because I know a lot of colleges, especially at the community colleges, where trying to go to, you have to complete a requirement before you can enroll in an online course.
Okay.
Especially for those of us who try and push that initiative to have those numbers from the state.
So how would you structure it so you could get that easily?
Yes,
and still?
let's say yes required prior to, yes required by the institution, or yes, a self-assessment not required.
Self-assessment that is optional.
Optional self-assessment.
So we have two yes categories, a no, and there's no specific initiative, or other, something that we still didn't capture. Okay, very good. The next note was about how are you providing student services to your students in online courses. And the reviewer's comment was for students with disabilities. Wait, sorry, that's not the right one. No, how are accessibility issues for online content in your courses addressed? And that one's just open-ended. And the reviewer wanted to know if it was just accessibility issues for students with disabilities. There's the concept of universal design, of course, that you should do it anyway because it's good for every student. But specifically, the ones that I was interested in are those that are required by law that we need to be dealing with. So I don't mind putting for students with disabilities. Thoughts on that? Any problem with adding for students with disabilities?
I'm kind of thinking that the reviewer might be looking at, we do training for accessibility about like font and color contrast and kind of just best practices for accessibility. And then there's a whole nother set of issues with transcripting, and so I don't know, maybe you want to kind of the basic design issues versus kind of, I don't know. I kind of understand where that this is so open as to need a whole lot more space.
It could be a whole survey unto itself,
Yes.
correct? Yeah. Well, I'm comfortable leaving it like this because it's only open-ended. There is no check boxes to fill in, and then coding the information to see what people are doing and how to better ask the question next time, perhaps. The one above that, that's the one I was jumping to. How are you providing student services to your students in online courses? The reviewer wondered if it should be, are you providing student support service to students only taking online courses? Or if that's what I meant. Really, if you're taking one face-to-face and one on campus, there are certain services that you would need to have online as well. So I'm comfortable leaving it as is, unless somebody thinks it should be exclusively online students. Okay. Now this one, what is the biggest single distance education challenge you are facing? The viewer suggested a follow-up question, and how are you addressing this challenge? That's a whole different question, and that seems like one of those things you may not want to commit to in an informal survey of this type. So my preference would be to let's find out what the problems are before we ask everybody for how they are fixing them. I know that if I'm going to be honest about what our single biggest challenge is, it's probably because I don't have great strategies to deal with it as of yet. So, and unless anybody wants to speak for asking respondents to address the challenges, I'm going to leave it as is. Next to, or no big deal, I think the suggestion was to give actual examples of the disciplines that might use home-based science labs like biology or physics rather than just the blanket STEM term. And then a suggestion to add whether or not folks are planning to implement e-textbooks of any type in the next 12 months. So that's easy to add. Okay, the next one, and I don't know if this is a critique of the whole survey or of just the particular item it's referring to. It says, too many questions. It's referring to, are you participating in public-private partnerships for online course and program development, delivery, including partnerships with publishers? If so, who? If you had them previously but moved away, please explain. And this is one that started off one way. It came out of the committee another way because we kept wanting to tweak and get a little bit more information out. But I think the suggestion was kind of elegant that change it to, yes, briefly explain your partnerships, including with whom and so on. So put it more in the descriptor for that box if they have some, to ask them to describe it. So that makes sense to me, to get rid of if so, who, and just to ask for those descriptions below. All right, the next one is, are you using predictive learning analytics in your online courses and programs? Where's Ginger? She needs to provide us some input on this one, right? And so the reviewer said this is very broad and have so many ways of implementation. Are you primarily interested in if they're using predictive modeling at all, whether it is for online courses or academic advising or anything? My response would be anything. Anything. We're desperate to know how people are doing this in a coordinated way that is providing them information to make better decisions. So if it is early intervention, if it's retention center, whatever it might be, we'd like to hear where people are using it and how they're having successes. So I think if people are willing to put a little time and briefly explain what they're doing, we want to hear from them, even if it's not particularly, maybe if they've got an advising notes type program and they use it with online and face-to-face students. Still love to hear about that. Is there anybody who'd like to speak for tailoring it a little more tightly for a particular type of predictive analytics that or learning analytics that you're interested in? An example of the type of the popular ones. Well, Blackboard Retention Center, which would allow you to set up particular triggers for whether students have certain performance levels, how often they are logging in, and if they cross certain thresholds on those, they get a reminder from the faculty member that, say, a premeditated message, or they may get a request to set up a appointment with the instructor or with a TA or so on.
Just give some examples. Great or something. Just.
Oh,
I
and
wasn't unsure. I was unsure.
grades first. Any other good examples that folks would like to? I mean, Civitas does some great stuff. Starfish. Okay. Or should I mean, if I've got that many examples, should I start? That might not get me what I want, because I really want to know what people are doing, and they can say, yeah, we're using these things, but I want to get to what else are you doing too. All right, the next one. Yeah. So the next one is about, that I wanted to deal with, is about regulatory compliance. I wrote, how are you handling the federal requirements for identity verification as described below, and then I quoted the SAC stuff. The reviewer suggested rephrasing it to, what is your strategy to meet? The more I think about it, I don't want somebody to cut and paste like their two-page response to the SAC standard 4.8.1 and 2 and 3 in here, but really want them to, in just a sentence or two, talk. Basically, we're using password and unique user ID, or we're using proctoring software services, or that kind of thing. Thoughts on the wording? How are you handling versus what is your strategy to meet? And basically, they're asking for the same thing, but I'm trying to guide them towards something that is more informal and not something that somebody'd say, hey, I saw in that survey you said you were doing this, because that's not the kind of stuff we're looking for here. And then we give them 3 choices: secure login and password, proctored examinations, or other. And really would like to know if there are things folks are doing that are in the other category. Thoughts on that?
So is the question, what are you capturing as the data points to verify, as opposed to your philosophy? Just
well,
out of
data points.
Right, so your data points are your unique student ID and one other thing, right? Or, it's pretty close to the, how are you not, I'm just trying to, if you're looking for a more focused response, that's kind of helping people tease out, oh, that's a really good way to capture it.
I think this is going to dovetail onto another agenda item, but I think part of it is, we're only required to have a secure login and password.
Yeah.
But who's moving away from that? Who's looking at the new technologies and kind of just starting to say, well, is everybody really just staying with the secure login and password, or has there really been a trend to adopt the new technologies? And kind of see where other institutions are there to kind of begin that dialogue of where should we be.
Should we ask that in that fashion then? Assume secure login and password and say, are you using other approaches beyond secure login and password?
You have to have secure login and password,
right,
or you're not going to get past sex on that one.
Yeah.
So that might be a better way to approach it.
Yeah, I think so.
If we do that, then we just have one option, proctored examinations and other. Do we want to provide more options, or do we want to remove proctored examinations and just have them give us a description?
Biometrics will be a good one.
I'm sorry?
Biometrics will be...
Biometrics, yeah.
I'd really be curious about the different types of proctored examination also.
And I think that's asked earlier. It's asked earlier.
That's right.
It goes through all the different types, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? So I've got 2 categories: biometrics, proctored examinations. These are beyond secure login and ID. And we have other as a catch-all, but okay, we will stick with those. The next one, who manages distance education at your institution per SAC's understanding of this issue? Reviewer's comment was, are you interested in the name or the position or the office? Not the name, that's okay. I'm thinking the position, who is the one person responsible. I'm thinking it probably ought to be the same person that is filling out this, but that may not be the case. We'll be able to check that too, because we're going to ask for those opening demographics. Who's filling this out? What's your title? So I'm going with position there instead of office. And that was everything. So I appreciate the consideration of this and all the time that we've taken here today and that others have contributed along the way. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you need to, on that first page,
Yes.
if you want to know specifically that they're responsible for distance ed, you probably need to put that in there, because so many of our positions are embedded. I mean, I'm that at my place, but I'm called teaching and learning. So,
Yeah.
you see, so you wouldn't know that if that's what I put down.
So at the very beginning, ask how.
Well, that question to the beginning.
Just move it.
Well, are you responsible for distance education? Just to clarify, are you the individual, yes, no, or something? If not, who is, or something?
I like your suggestion for just moving that question up to the top. Who manages distance education at your institution? Or are you the individual who manages it? If I say, are you, and they say no, then I don't know who is. But no, I think I move that up to the beginning. Good thought. So many of us have titles that don't have distance learning in them anymore, or maybe never did. So, any other observations? Okay. Well, thank you for your time and input on this. Andrew, thank you for graciously being the go-between with Data Collection Committee and getting feedback to me.
Can you just talk about the next steps then?
Sure. Obviously, go back and make these changes. That can be done quickly. I still want to address with Andrew whether or not we can get the list of the individuals who this will go to, name and email address, and that would probably be provosts. And the preference would be to set it up in such a way that we could track responses. Because two options I have is, done, here's an anonymous link, Andrew, send it out. And the other is that I create a panel that has the email address tied to each person's link to the survey, so that when it gets emailed out to them and they pass it along to whomever is going to complete it at their institution, once it's completed, when I send a reminder out, that person doesn't continue to get it because they're done. It also allows, as people finish it, for me to see who hasn't and follow up with them and say, hey, just wanted to make sure that this has gotten into the right person, and if there are any questions you have about the survey or completing it, let me know, that kind of thing. So that's something I'd like to work through. I know that you said you have a committee here that would send out the link directly. What I'd like to do is work with you on them authoring kind of a wrapper for the email that would go out, so it appears still like it's coming from them, but it comes out individual links to each of those provosts as an appeal.
Well, I'm going to work with you on that because, excuse me, since we're going to be sending it to all the institutions, it needs to come from the coordinating board, and I understand it has to come from our division. So once we get all the revisions that you have right now from the survey, we send that to me. Then we'll discuss on how to send it out to all the institutions in the state.
And will you put some guiding language on that? Because I think the first thing they're going to say is, why do they want this information? Who's going to use it and how will it be used?
Yeah, so why do we want it? Because this is an Ltac survey.
Okay, so as long as...
It's not a staff survey, right? I mean, it's the advisory committee that agreed. We would like to have this information among ourselves to better understand how people are handling some of the day-to-day challenges.
Will we be sharing it then with the rest of the state that may also want this information? Because there are a lot of people that aren't on this committee that may really like to see this as well.
And we talked about that before, and I'm of a mind that absolutely, but I'd also like to consider the possibility of embargoing it for a short amount of time, maybe a couple months, that if you participated in the survey, you'll get this information here. If you didn't, then you'll get it at some future date, unless somebody just shares the results with you. But then you're connected and all's well with the world anyway. But so is that a possibility to, once we get the results and perform the analytics, that those people who participated get it several months before you would send it out to everybody that we invited to participate?
I mean, we can discuss that in the agency. We have to see how that works, because since the Ltac is truthfully a component of the coordinating board, this advisory component, the information is open to public record. Correct. So therefore, if they actually wanted it, they could actually get it. We can discuss that. That's more of a strategic.
Yeah, because what we want is for people to, because this takes 30 to 45 minutes to complete if you're going to do a good job with it. So it's not a small ask, but it's a greater good to have a census instead of just a smattering of responses on it. So whatever we can do strategically to encourage people to participate, I'm all for.
Sure. And I'm looking forward to working with you on getting this distributed.
And this has been a long time coming, so I appreciate everybody's patience with moving this forward. I think it's worth sustaining the effort to see it through, so thank you.
If we have any other thoughts about this afterwards, can we just send that to you then?
Of course.
Okay, so if anybody is on the plane driving back or whatever thinks, we should have included another question, we'll forward that on just so that we make them spend 46 minutes on this, not 45. Thank you very much, Patrick. I know that he's been working on this a long time, and it's been back and forth, and Andrew's been in touch with it, and I've been copied on a lot of the emails, but I do know they've both been doing a lot of work, and thank you both on behalf of all of us. So, good. Okay, next agenda item, I think, is back to Michelle discussing the issue of purchasing pools for institutions.
So, especially amongst the community colleges, many of you know that VCT, they used to pay for quite a bit of our software, and they made the decision not to do that. Some of the institutions were trying to get together and perhaps develop a purchasing pool so that we could get a better deal with many of the vendors that now we've come to rely on since it was provided for free for so many years. And the last I've heard of it is it's going to go back through TAC, but it's not going to be like it used to be. And many of you may not be aware that prior to VCT coming along and providing free money to us all, there actually were purchasing pools where the various colleges in Texas could get together, and if we were all going to purchase soft chalk, for instance, we would then go in with a much stronger position and then be able to get a better deal. And I would kind of wonder what would be the response to this group of kind of, exploring, trying to bring that back. That was before I got the email. So those of you who are involved with VCT, you probably got the email where we can now contact, I'm sorry, I don't have his name, and try to get lower prices, but it isn't going to have the same power that it did in the past. And perhaps Pam could speak a little bit more to that because it was administered through Dallas before.
Oh, right. There's kind of two different things I could comment on this about. There used to be something called the Texas Consortium for Educational Telecommunications, and it was created. I created it back in 1986, and it was really a group purchasing process so that we could actually buy telecourses and do a group purchase on it. And then that evolved, and there was some software and whatever. But when the Virtual College of Texas came out and offered, we'll pay for it for you, that group purchasing process just went away because free was better than having to negotiate for better prices. But now that free has gone away, now we're back to saying maybe we need to get back and seeing if there isn't a way to collaborate on a group process, because surely if there's more in the buying power, there might be a better deal. Now, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and this kind of relates to something that I think the coordinating board was talking about, doing a group purchasing something to try to give us a discount. The coordinating board is going back to a procurement process where they go to the vendors and say, we're going to give you access to everybody in our state. What is your best rate you can give them? So as opposed to 10 institutions going in and saying, how can we buy your product with 10 of us, they're asking the vendor to say, what is your best rate? And it might be $3,000 per institution, or it might be scaled depending on the FTE. So there's a probability that there's a better price, but there's no group purchasing clout put into it. So that's what Michelle is just saying. Is there any interest? And at one point, the coordinating board was talking about possibly coming up with something like this. And so we're just asking where this is. This was probably several years ago. There were different faces on this committee. Patrick might have been there when we were talking about this.
I'm not sure. I've been here several years yet, so I'm not sure if I was here during that time for Ltac. But I can look into it and see if there's still, if that's still out there, if they're still thinking about it.
If there's anything just under the scene, I did, and his name is Charlie Oberlin or something like that, with the Texas Association of Community Colleges. He is managing, reaching out to software vendors or whoever has something that we might want to buy, and he's negotiating that. But what Michelle's talking about is, hey, there are 20 of us, or there are 15 of us that want this. Can you give us a better rate? And so what used to be in place is no longer in place. So this is reinventing or redoing, or if there is something else in the works that we don't know about, we'd like to know.
I'm curious about that because I know Prairie View being in the Texas A&M system, Mark Stone is doing a lot of really aggressive collaborative pricing, and that's what's happening with us right now. So just interested to see what you guys are doing, and if it's the same thing that he's doing, we just need a little bit more information.
It actually was. I remember the person that was really pushing this was from A&M, asking for, is there a group way to do this? So I'm not surprised if the system has now come together and said, this is something we'll do on behalf of everybody within your system.
We would be interested in it as well. Does the new approach, not free, but negotiating for better prices, include four-year institutions? Because previously VCT was a community college enterprise, right? But with looking at this new paradigm.
The one that preceded when VCT had funds to be able to pay for it was we included, actually, most of the community college in Texas. I know Midwestern State was in on it. There were a couple four-year schools as well as some Oklahoma schools that wanted to come in on the group process. So, and it worked pretty well. But the other part is that there almost had to be an entity that was willing to do all of the work, because there is work. And the reason they're willing to give you a deal is they don't have to deal with one person here rather than 25 of you. And so how the process worked, because it was actually run out of Dallas, is we just took a percentage of whatever the process was, which paid for the work it took to do all the coordinating, and then it still saved all the institutions money. So that's how it used to work. But that actually just folded finally not too many years ago, and now VCT goes away. So
got to jump started again.
Yeah.
What is the role of DIR relative to our
and actually DIR was talking about doing this at one time too, and they were doing it, but they really weren't doing it for the educational software side. It was really more real IT stuff.
Right. And I know that all our institutions got a memo from the governor recently about the DIR issues and new regulations that are coming down there, because I guess there were some problems. So I don't know if that means probably not an option for us to move forward quickly in that, but definitely interested in looking at how we can negotiate better pricing. And maybe some of the things that we see out of the survey is everybody's using this. That is an obvious software. We need to go and say, here are 20 of us across different university and community college systems. Let's come together and see if we can get a better price on this one thing, and then move from there.
We add that to the survey, asking that question about the collaborative pricing, or I don't know how to bring it up, but it might be you're already asking all of these technical, what are we using? Just a thought.
Would we be interested in that? I mean, or participate if it were there?
I'd be really interested if it's something that the co-board could take on, considering
the legislative report, was it last year, where it was talking about all the crazy different prices we're all paying for Blackboard, and it's all over the board, and that kind of even coming off the heels of that, there's just, the survey might indicate these are the very common software packages or DE type resources that we are using. I think it fits very well, not just with our committee, but by the co-board, and something that it could be doing statewide.
This was under discussion whenever I came back on the board. That was one of the issues, and I do know, again, it was, can't think of her name, from the A&M system. Yeah, Sherry, yeah, Pappas. It was really pushing that. So maybe you could just get an update on, do you know her, Sherry? And just ask her whatever happened to that idea, because she was really spearheading it.
I can tell you what happened. Mark Stone came in. He's taken on whatever she was doing.
Okay.
So that's the rest of it.
Okay. Well, she was trying to get it more statewide, so
Right.
it would be a nice update to see if you think you're
I'll find
actually
out.
saving any money. If we could get an update on that.
Okay.
And then also, if there's any interest at all, the coordinator.
I'll look into what's going on in the
Okay,
coordinating
that
board.
would give us something to put on the agenda for next time. Something else, Cindy? Okay, the next one also is kind of a discussion that we've been having. We're all addressing that issue of what is it taking for student authentication. We all just said, well, we have to be doing, password change, but then is it biometrics? Is it something else that we're working with? And Michelle and Andrew and I were having that discussion, proctored exams, that if somehow we don't come up with a statement on what problem we're trying to solve, that the vendors are actually presenting their solutions to us, and we may be buying a solution we don't really need, and we may all be buying a different solution that we don't really need, or the federal government or the state's going to come out with, this is what you should have been solving, and we solved another problem. We just wondered if we should have a discussion about that, or if we could have a little bit of discussion now about what we're doing. And we're all being hit up with great solutions. And they're all saying, this is coming, this is coming. And I do keep hearing the feds are coming, making sure that, do you know who is really taking that course, and is the student that's actually, taking that exam really the student that signed up for the course, and all of this. And they're presenting all of these great solutions and sometimes expensive solutions, but do we really want to be doing that? So that was kind of the question we were having. I'll let Michelle take it from here, since she was also very articulate in expressing this concern.
I tend to drive the vendors crazy at the various conferences, because they're all telling you, no, 4.8.1, it says it right here. It says, as new technologies become available, that you're adopting them. And this is what they mean by this. They have white papers, and really, right now, it's secure login and passwords. But I keep coming to this kind of a phrase that Pam was using when we were talking, is that our purchasing patterns are driving the policy. If everybody's going out there and saying, okay, this is the way to go, well then, as the Higher Education Reauthorization Act is being looked at, and they're doing a survey and saying, well, look, 80% are using monitored online proctoring. Well, then that's what we mean. If 80%, everybody else needs to do it too. And so our purchasing patterns are driving the policy. And we really don't have a clear policy of what we're addressing. Faculty are coming at it from an academic integrity standpoint, meaning that they want to look at, are they cheating? And that's where a lot of the proctoring solutions are coming on. Sure, they show their little ID at the beginning, so that's the identification side. Some vendors are approaching it from the financial aid standpoint, where you need to, the last substantive attendance. It's not just the last login, it's the last time they participated in a discussion group. And so you can have some of the analytic companies trying to look at those issues and saying, well, that's how we know that the person is not just who they are, but that they are attending throughout the entire class. You have your biosig and your biometric ones, and the challenge questions where they're, attaching them to their credit reports, which is a very different issue when you're looking at the community college systems. If all of the four-year institutions start jumping on that challenge software, well, we have a lot of students at the community college levels who don't have credit reports, and so those challenge questions fail a lot more, especially when you have a large dual credit population. So it was my idea to bring it back as we're looking at these principles for principles and best practices for distance education, that maybe we want to start looking at as a state, what do we mean, or what do we understand 4.8.1 to mean when it's talking about authentication? At what point, what is the best practice? Is this authentication only at exam time? Is there another way? But start having a dialogue so it's not just who's ever jumped on the pretty shiny whatever the vendors are offering driving the policy in the future. So.
Has anybody adopted any other solutions beyond login passwords? We're trying to address this. We just had a recent one, a concern about a financial aid Pell Runner, and some of these we're going to solve those problems too. Has anybody adopted any of these other solutions?
We're using ProctorU, but it's on a very limited basis. It's not across all of our online programs, certainly. In fact, there are just 2 that have used it. It's on.
Ours primarily, like I said, it's come from the faculty academic integrity side. So we are, of course, going with the cheap option of Respondus Monitor because we were already Respondus users. And so we're trying out our 200 free seats, and we're in a piloting phase at the moment. But ours wasn't coming at it as much from 4.8.1 as it was an academic integrity issue that may also solve 4.8.1. So.
The A&M system has a CATIE group that looks at academic technologies, and one of the subcommittees specifically is designed to look at these issues that are coming up. We ran into some complications when looking at things like some of the sources that you've talked about from legal, with video cameras in the library, in a public library where a student is accessing their internet from, recording, if there's children in the area, things like that. So there's so many different angles. We see a solution, it sounds great, and then all of a sudden we start to go through systems and say, can we do this? And it's like, no, but you have to for SACS compliance. And we're like, oh, well, that's good. We're so glad this is uniformed. So we are very well aware of it. We've done research within the CATIE group. We have sub-task force as well, so that is definitely a group you are more than welcome to reach out to. And just put our efforts together because, again, the more we dig into it, the more there are layers. And then you look at it from the systemic view, and then you look at it from, the purchasing financial view. So it's a conversation we need to have. It's a conversation I think several groups are already having, so why not come together and make that happen?
It looks like Rex is stepping forward.
Well, yeah, but this has nothing to do with my role at the coordinating board. This actually has to do with my experience prior to coming here. And before I left Midland College for a couple of years, we used Digital Proctor. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. It was an Austin-based, I guess it still is. I haven't had any contact with them in over a year now, but it was an Austin-based company, and what they used was typing patterns to authenticate. And I must admit, I was very skeptical of this in the beginning, and we actually wound up being sort of providing a lot of beta testing for them with this. And I was very skeptical of it as an identifier, but they pretty much convinced me that your typing pattern is just as unique as your fingerprint is, or pretty darn close anyway. Actually, they had some data that suggested it's actually more unique than your fingerprint. And I even asked them all the questions about, well, what about those of us that are, use the hunt and peck method? And they said, well, it doesn't matter what method you're using, you still have a pattern nevertheless. And I actually started paying some attention to me as I typed. And they're right. There are some keys I hit harder than other keys, and all that kind of stuff establishes a pattern. I also asked questions about, okay, so, my typing is much better at 10 in the morning than it is at 10 at night. You can account for all those things. And over time, it actually turned out to be a pretty interesting
way of authentication, and we had one particular online program that was 100% online, and people from all over the United States were taking this program, and they used it and used it as best I could tell, used it very effectively as well. So it's, there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, and you're right, quite often these things get driven by whatever the institution's own internal policies are about this, or whatever they adopt, then tends to drive the policy on the other end sometimes. And so, and I do believe, and I've been convinced for some time that it really is a matter of time before the feds say, a password isn't going to get it any longer. What else are you doing? And SACS has that language in 4.8. And I think they have it there for a very deliberate reason, and that is that they too are convinced that it's not, is it going to happen? It's just, when is it going to happen? And so I think it does behoove us to, it behooves everybody to sort of look at this stuff, and that may be another one of those places where some kind of cooperative purchasing thing could actually lower the price of this. And we'll certainly look into this whole notion of whether you could use the coordinating board as a vetting tool, and maybe even go beyond just saying, look, maybe we'll have all these people participate, but be a little more on the front end of this, and then be able to say these folks will participate if we can get some kind of price break on this kind of stuff. But keep in mind too, there is no free lunch. VCT didn't really provide anything free. They used the dues paid by the member colleges to fund all that stuff. So, but as a result, though, they did get some pretty decent price breaks on stuff because they had a much bigger purchasing pool. So there is a lot of power in that, and so to some extent, and to the extent that we could help facilitate bringing some of that back, we'd be certainly glad to look into it and see what we can do for you. So,
I think you're right. If we're into purchasing something that none of us have purchased before, the group buying process might work better than going back to Blackboard after we've all been using them for 20 years and saying, how about if we come together, you give us a better deal? The answer is probably going to be not a lot. Yeah. So.
Well, that may be true, but their competitors may be.
Well, that's true.
So, but we can give you But you never know, and it's hard to change after you've been using something for a long time too. Right. I mean, it becomes institutionalized just like everything else does. So,
right. What does 4.8 actually say?
Well, it's on the left.
It's there?
It's this one here.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah. So 4.8, 1.1, the main parts at the bottom, it says the institution basically verifies through methods such as secure login and password, proctored examinations, or new or other technologies and practices that are effective in verifying student identification. Now, the Higher Education Reauthorization Act, the language is a little different. It says, or new or other technologies as they become available. And I think that's an important distinction, because that's where, as we're kind of migrating to the proctored exams or the BioSig or those, we're driving the new technologies becoming available because we're moving this way. And I'm just wondering if this committee can't offer maybe some guidelines. What is authentication in distance ed? What is a best practice? Is it only at exam time that you are verifying the identification? And what are the different points? A lot of the vendors now are jumping on the financial aid attendance verification and trying to build that into their package. So it's going to take a sampling of discussion board activities. You open it up and it opens up and it says, this has been identified as an identification activity. And so you have to identify at that point. Just wondering if we can't come up to some common definitions or best practices to meet this. Or if that's,
or do we want to do that?
Or do we want to do that? Or
right.
do we? No. I'm just always concerned when every time I go to a conference and they swarm around you
They
like
send
land
you,
sharks and say,
proposals.
no, yes, they do that, but you have to also consider this and this and this and this. And before we know it, going to be a biometric fingerprint for every activity or something. I don't know.
Other comments on this feedback? Or just a yeah? Yeah.
But wouldn't the survey drive a lot of the questions that we might have about how we're going in the directions of purchasing?
I think so. Yeah.
I think once we get the data back from the survey, I think that would help us form the correct question and to answer this. So I think we might want to wait until. And I'm just, I'm not
That's a good point. I do think we're probably, once we get the survey back, there might be a number of issues that need more than just this is good information, really delve into it and figure out, is there a solution or is there something more we should be doing for whatever it is we find out. So
then we can see what each institution is doing. Is there a large change in what one's doing from another? Is there several different ways that people are taking care of it? And I think that would come from the survey.
What's our ending date on our soft chalk?
August 31st.
Because I may want to leave town.
July 31st. It's the summer.
Yes, but it's in the middle of our summer session, so it's July 31st.
Yeah, most of them are going through, because we had something in that, and it's going through the end of July.
So if
August.
we do a group purchase, we've got to move on this, because I don't know about y'all, but I can't start fall semester without soft chalk. I'll have to leave town. I really will.
Yeah, we're going to have to probably drop 2 in order to pay for all the licenses we need to make sure we keep soft chalk. After we've moved half of our faculty to it, they really would run us out of town.
There's a point.
Michelle, I find this particular topic really intriguing, and I think the catch is there are other drivers too. So like on the higher ed strategic plan that Ginger mentioned earlier, one of the other issues is student debt. So if we're going to have to implement some type of technology, which we don't currently license, in order to take care of this, it has to be paid for somewhere. Is it going to be an imposition on our students? Because where else are we going to turn to? The state? No. So with that in mind, it is this game of nobody wants to move any faster than anybody else does, because we have to allocate our scarce resources in order to accomplish that. So there may be something else we're not able to provide. So I think it is timely for us to decide. We think this is satisfactory, and we understand the risk that as the feds or whomever moves forward, our accrediting bodies, and push this, that then it is a compliance issue and we have to catch up, and we'll figure out how to finance it then. But do we want to start making that commitment any time before then? If it is relatively easy fix of doing an RFP for the appropriate software that'll solve this problem for you, I mean, do we need to rush out and get something now? If it's because most of these solutions, you could launch them within a 6-month window. Certainly you would have that much time to know it is a requirement, not just a nice to have or somebody has suggested it. No, that's just my
I think what
thoughts on
Andrew
it.
just said, we're probably going to get some really good data from this survey, and maybe there are some ongoing issues that need to stay on this agenda at least every 6 months, bring it up again and kind of test where everybody is, so that we aren't purchasing before we need to purchase, and at the same time we're not going to be caught flat-footed in case something gets put on us and we have to act really quickly. So I think your survey really does provide us some really good information that we can choose to act upon or not.
Does anybody know about SACS's roadmap for changing the language in 4.8.1?
What I understand is it's going to keep following the Higher Education Reauthorization Act, which the last conference I was at, I didn't write his name down. They did an update on it, and it's not likely that it's going to be reauthorized through Obama's term. So we kind of have and so when you kind of follow through all of those, I don't think we're in any rush immediately. But as everybody's going out there, and because, of course, the vendors are telling you, it's coming here tomorrow. Right. Tomorrow you're going to lose your accreditation. If you don't do this, you're going to lose all your federal funding. I think part of it is just slow down and look. Don't just start purchasing. A lot of the SACS conferences, even there, I went to one. It's secure login and password is perfectly fine. Do not bust your budgets. Yes, you want to investigate this. Take some time. Have the conversation at your college. Like I said, when we started addressing it, it didn't have anything to do with 4.8.1. It was entirely an academic integrity issue where there's still this sense in online education that, well, I don't know, they're just cheating, they're just looking it up. And that's where our discussion came and where we're moving into this. And now it's just kind of as an afterthought, well, that'll also meet this 4.8.1 if it actually came to pass. But I think institutions do need to, if they're looking at these solutions, not necessarily be driven by the technology. They should be driven by the conversations on how to improve their distance ed programs and what are the concerns faculty have with those distance ed programs, and then address that issue versus some technology that supposedly is going to, accomplish 4.8.1.
Is there anybody else that hasn't spoken that does have a solution to this that you're using beyond password?
I mean, as long as it says at the option of the institution, everything else costs money. So that's the consideration. I mean, at least for me personally.
Okay, good discussions. Thank you. Are we coming to the end of this now? I do have an update on that just came through. I was reading some email here. There are now 20 states that have joined on with NC's or have joined their regionals that are now part of NC SARA, so 20 states and then 200 institutions. We keep talking about saving the money, doing all the work externally. There still will be a cost to support NC SARA because NC SARA is currently being funded primarily by Lumina, and that is a temporary get it launched. But once it gets going, there's still going to be work coordinating all these other things we talked about earlier amongst the states, amongst the accreditors, amongst the feds, and all of that. So there will be an ongoing cost to support basically Marshall Hill's organization at WICHE, but that's going to be based on the FTEs, and I think they range from 4, 6, 8,000, depending on how big your institution is, or maybe 6,000.
It's 2, 4, and 6. 2, 4, and 6,000.
Yeah.
Depending on your FTE. Yeah. That's the annual rate. But the information that we've gathered from some institutions in Texas suggests that right now, the cost of just what you pay to other states can range anywhere from $25,000 a year to well over $200,000 a year. So a $6,000 price tag, even at the top, is pretty cheap.
Right. So that's nationally 20 states in, 200 institutions are in, again, which is above the projections that they originally set out for this. So we just, we'll see what happens with Texas. You have any further update on any of that? What's happening in our state?
Well, we're still. I think we're still, or maybe it's back on my plate now again. I can't quite remember at the moment, but we're still actually drafting the legislation for it. My position on this has been that as far as legislation goes, all we have to do is have legislation that authorizes the coordinating board to be the portal for it, and then the rest of it can be filled in by administrative rule. And there was some debate about physical presence, because the current definition that Texas uses for physical presence is different than the definition that SARA uses. And right now, essentially, we define physical presence as any time you have a student, and when I say anytime you meaning anybody from outside of the state of Texas. So any institution outside of the state of Texas that's operating in Texas and has a student doing something other than purely online, so a clinical, an internship, a practicum, or anything else, that establishes a physical presence in Texas, which puts you under certain statute and rule actually under rule. It's not clear to me that it's actually statute at this point. But what Sarah does, you only establish physical presence when you have more than 10 or more students in a particular location. And right now, for us, it's one student in any location. I mean, you can have 10 students, they could be in 10 different places scattered all over the state. That would still constitute physical presence for us, but it would not for Sarah right now. So there's still some ongoing debate about that, and I don't know that it's a deal breaker at all, but we just need to make sure that we've got the language of the legislation correct, so that we can still do what we need to do in terms of monitoring, but at the same time allow people to participate in Sarah. So we're still kind of, and I think I have another draft on my desk right now that. We've been going back and forth with
that issue of physical presence and how many students creates a real problem is debated heavily at the national level as well.
Yeah, and Sarah's gone back and forth on this itself, and they've changed their definition of physical presence at least 3 times over the past year. And right now they're at the 10 level because they're also trying to grapple with what the states are doing too. And in the end, it really all comes down to it's a consumer protection issue, really, in terms of what's the safeguard for the students themselves. And so it's almost, so part of the question I get is, well, so they're willing to safeguard 10, but they're not willing to safeguard 9. So how does that look? Well, that's kind of a gross simplification of the issue, really, but that's sort of where it comes down to sometimes. And so that's still I know Sarah's still trying to kick this around too a little bit. And you're right, it's an ongoing debate everywhere about how do you define that. And there is some competitiveness to this too, and that is, how do you operate? But under current Texas law, we don't really have any regulation of institutions that operate outside of Texas that want to offer online in Texas. And the interesting thing to me is that to be a part of Sarah, you wind up subjecting yourself to in-state regulation and oversight that you might not have otherwise without Sarah. So there's actually, in some sense, it actually provides greater protection on one level, because those institutions, if they want to be a part of it, they have to be vetted through the system. And it could be one of those things where it gets around with students. Students don't really, for accreditation, it's kind of interesting. Students don't really know about accreditation, don't understand it at all, but they do understand that not having accreditation is a bad thing. And so this may be one of those deals where at some point they understand that not being a part of Sarah officially is a bad thing, and they begin to avoid institutions that are not a part of that. So. But that's where we are right now. We're still going through the vetting process with legislation, which we have to get wrapped up. I think the 15th of March is the deadline to file bills, and you can always clean them up if you file them, by the way. But then you have to do substitutes, and so it gets kind of messy. But we're still working on that part, and hopefully it'll go through. I think one of the things that the institutions at some point will need to step up and remind their representatives and senators that this really is a good thing that they ought to be behind. So,
good.
If they think that, I cannot endorse legislation one way or the other. So if your institution thinks it's a good thing, then they need to say so. And if they think it's a bad thing, they probably need to say that too, for whatever the reason.
Well, thank you for your input. Good. Are there any other issues? We are looking at future agenda items, and I think we've probably been adding several of those as we've been going. I think we've got at least 2 or 3 things that I've been writing down. And I know that the subcommittee was meeting during lunch to talk about meeting actually at TXDLA and getting a face-to-face discussion there going, so that's coming up in April. So you want to take it from here about next meetings and stuff?
Yes, I would, and I've already
Cindy, yeah.
for the survey.
Right. Is there
When? Well, Patrick, how long do you think you'll take for the revisions?
Within the week, so next week. We want to time it around, I would say, don't want to launch it until April 1 because we have various spring breaks coming up.
Correct.
And then leave it open for the whole month of April. I don't know if we should send it out on April 1st, April Fool's Day, April 2nd. But then that gives us enough time to track how many people are participating, send out reminders, and then do analysis during May. And we're looking at a typically June meeting, or would we meet in May?
That's what we're going to discuss also for this one. If I was to look at anything you have with as far as the revisions to the survey questions, if you could give me that next week,
yeah,
then we can talk. Okay. So let's put this next week to get the revisions done.
Could we work in parallel? Because I think the revisions to the questions are going to be minimal based on what we had here, and you said that those are really just recommendations or observations, and we could do with them what we wanted, and we handled those as a committee. But could we work in parallel and be pursuing the options for distributing it using panel where we can track participation versus just anonymous link where I think we'll have a lower response rate?
I can talk with you about that next week to get the distribution weight worked out between you and our division.
Okay.
Because really what I would like to do, you speak some language that I'm not quite accustomed to as far as what you have to do to distribute the survey. I'd like to have you speak directly with who we have in our division.
Be happy to. Sure.
That would be the best thing, I think. So we could try that next week and trying to get the survey out by beginning of April. Does that help? Okay. Before we go to the last one, I wanted to thank Cindy Valdez. She's the one that organized all this and got all the lunches and organized all the place settings, and I want to thank her very much. She did a great job. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank Elizabeth Steele. She has been working with us since she has arrived at the coordinating board, has it been a year yet? Just a year. She's had the pleasure of working with me during Ltac. And I appreciate you. She's been doing the minutes. She's doing an excellent job. When I'm looking at the future items, we're going to be discussing, obviously, the survey, and as we get the survey results back, because we're going to try to get that out at the beginning of April. That's one of the agenda items I know we'll have. Currently, for the doctoral program approval process, there's one that has been submitted. It has not gone through staff review yet. It will be going to the subcommittee shortly, but I'm not sure how much is going to get done during the March, because March, as Patrick pointed out, is spring break month. So we'll try to get that all sent to the subcommittee by the end of the month, all that taken care of. If necessary, we might, if we needed to have one during phone conference, we could also do that, but I think it's possible we can wait till the next meeting, so that could be one more agenda item. I don't know if there's any others that are going to be submitted, but I just know of one so far. Right now, I'd have to go to Cindy and find out when this room is open during June, July. Well, the next board meeting would be July. So if we were to meet in order to consider recommendation of approval for the doctoral program, it would have to be at the beginning of June. So I believe it has a proposed implementation date of fall 15. I believe. I have to go back and look. If that's the case, then it would have to be June, July. Institution? I want to say it is higher education, EDD in higher education, Texas A&M Commerce, I believe. But it has been resubmitted as a single institution, as a single. No, that's a different one. This is one we discussed that had three places at once, and then they resubmitted it. Yes, and so that one is coming up. We can. I'll look at the calendar, and I will get back with you on that. But for the regular meeting, I would
try to look in June, first 2 weeks of June if possible, and see what dates that we have open. And this is all contingent upon the availability of the boardroom. Do you have any other agenda items that I can write down so I can start to maybe prepare before the meeting, besides what I've already taken from the minutes that Elizabeth's going to have in the notes that I have on the agenda? Yeah, but things will come up, believe me. There will be stuff for us to do. But that's it right now.
Okay. All right, I think we've really had a good meeting today, a lot of good information and a lot of good activity going forward. So thank you, everybody who made it here today and took their time away from work to help with all the issues that are happening at the state level. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Good.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. So moved.
So moved.
Thank you so much.
You know, now that you're officially done, under Robert's Rules of Order,
Yes.
the chair can actually make a motion to adjourn,
Okay.
and it does not require a second.
All right. All right.
And there's never any discussion.
Thank you.